Live. Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am excited about this. You're on the Scariest Movie Ever YouTube channel right now. I'm KG Osborne with a Z. And actually, I can hear an echo on my end. Let me turn my volume off. There we go. We got that. Anyway, guys, are we living in the days of Noah? This is something that a lot of us question. And we're going to go over some of that tonight. I'm excited to get into that as well. But what I'm more excited about is introducing my guest who's going to walk with us through this. And we're going to cover a lot of different topics. And he's been around, from my memory, about 3 years or so. And throughout the years, I've always caught his work. We've talked in the past. He just reminded me, too, that I did talk before about having him on, and then it just kind of slipped away. And you know what? And I do feel bad, but on the other hand, he's not alone. And there's a lot of you out there like, oh, yeah, that happened to me, too. So, I'm sorry. I get caught in my dream world sometimes, and I get caught on projects as well, and I just, I get obsessed. But enough about all that. His name is Dayz of Noah. That's his YouTube channel. I think he's fantastic. You'll see tonight if you haven't heard of him. If you have, well, that's why you're here, and you're probably really excited. And I'm just going to let him kind of introduce himself, talk a little bit about how he got into this. Then we're going to actually look at some biblical scripture about the days of Noah, and then talk about what's happening in the world today. So without any more delay, Dayz of Noah, welcome. Thanks so much, man.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for having me.
For sure. You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I've been a listener of your channel and viewer of your work for a while, way before I even started making my own content. I guess how I got started was really just first coming to Christ, learning the Bible properly for the first time in my life, late in my life, that is. And I started to do my own research, and somehow I ended up finding different forms of content on YouTube. I really don't know how I got there. I assume it's just the spirit. And yeah, I found your channel. I found Brother Theo of the Unplug 'Em channel, and a few others, and I was just enamored. I really couldn't. It's a hard thing to explain, but I just remember a lot of things you were demonstrating was stuff I wasn't very familiar with, especially regarding esoterics and a lot of these occult types of ideas. Though I've heard of these things in my studies prior, I never really went into much depth. Most of my education was in the field of psychology and in history, sociology. I did my undergrad studies at UC Berkeley, where I guess.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
You survived Berkeley. That's amazing.
I survived Berkeley. Yes, I did experience the concentration camps of the neoliberal California academic system. And yeah, I actually was a young socialist while I was there. I guess I considered myself a Marxist to some degree. I was all about it. I was definitely a leftist for pretty much the majority of my time in school. And even after. I guess the only thing that really woke me up out of the leftism was definitely scripture and the Most High God, and through Christ, of course. And from there, especially once I got on YouTube, I realized, like, wow, there's this whole movement. There's this entire community that's aware of these things, and I wanted to learn more. So I started reading, I started researching and studying. I spent about at least a couple years kind of in the shadows, just studying. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just wanted to know more. And eventually I realized, okay, I've studied quite a bit now. I think I should start making some of my own content. And I got a lot of inspiration through channels like yours, and especially Brother Theo of the Unplug 'Em channel, who was probably I think the channel that I first really heard scripture being read.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought him up too, just for the people out there that haven't heard. And immediately I'm thinking now in the near future, and I don't really do this, like I need to hit him up and maybe have us three do a show together too, because I know he's still putting them out. I watched one of his, I guess you could say sermon, but it's much deeper than that. And he's so well educated on everything, guys. I mean, I'm talking like the Apocrypha, you know, all the additional books to the Bible, but he's Jesus based, you know.
Absolutely. I
So
mean,
it's
yeah,
great. Go ahead.
he's amazing. He's one of these kind of unsung heroes, if you will. Um, his depth of knowledge is it's just amazing. And you know, I understand. I I consider myself more along the academic lines. I could never come up with, or I guess I haven't necessarily had the time or the experience, but just the knowledge base that he has is something that I don't have. And I really appreciate what he puts out and what I've learned from him. And he's been so inspiring to me. And he's just such a spiritual person in the Christian sense. And yes, his work, it's different, you know, it's very unique.
Yeah.
And he's kind of in many cases unknown in as far as a mainstream appeal is concerned. But those who have been in the so-called truth community for, let's just say, since about 2013 or 14, I'm sure they're aware of his work. His stuff got really big when he was discussing the hip hop industry, and he does what is it called? The spells of spelling. That's really what
Oh yeah.
got me. I was like, wow, what is this? And he just breaks down all these esoterics and shows you how how the darkness works in this world in a way that tries to paint a picture to keep you away from finding God and finding the truth through Christ. And then
Yeah.
he has the songwriter's secret. I mean, he has all of these great theoretical areas that he really dives in, and they're all original. It all comes from him. So he's just a big inspiration to me. But I definitely give all, aside from the Most High God, of course, as far as this earth is concerned, I give him and his work most of the credit for me even being on YouTube. I mean, I didn't really know how to make videos in this kind of way until I saw videos like yours and Brother Theo. So I definitely appreciate you guys and respect you guys for being pioneers in this small little corner of the internet world that we occupy.
Gosh, thanks, man. Thank you. And I'm gonna have to put a link to Brother Theo's channel as well under the show. At the end, I'll put a link for yours and also his, so people can find both. Yeah, you're missing out if you've never heard of Brother Theo, man. Unplug him, the channel. And again, even back to Dayz of Noah. If you're new here, this is Dayz of Noah. Some of you are here for him, and I've seen you in the chat. You're excited, and again, I say you should be. And for the new ones, buckle up. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, but yeah, thank you, man. That is weird to look around sometimes. I'm constantly finding channels that are disappearing. You know, right now I'm working on the scariest movie ever made, part 2. I'm going to launch it January 1st. I've mentioned this before, but the point of bringing that up is it is so hard to find any good clips anymore on YouTube. The kind of good stuff, I mean, like real heavy truth, you know, and it's, man, it is tough to navigate. I'm piecing it together. You know, it takes a little longer to find some of the stuff, but most of the stuff I'm thinking, especially with the event from September, you know, a long time ago, that's really hard to find. But anyway, you know, it'll work itself out. But the point is, it sure has changed a lot, and so many people are gone. So I do feel like I'm old school now, and it feels strange sometimes to look around and be like, wow, there's so many people gone. And there's just a handful of us left, it seems, you know. So, but I think a lot of people give up. I think that's the psyop of what's happening on YouTube as well, is that a lot of people, when they start suppressing your channel, I've seen people straight up just give up. They're done, you know, and that's part of it. But go ahead.
It's discouraging. I remember, I think it was, I can't remember the exact date, but do you remember the time when news reports started coming out about YouTube and Facebook? They're going to start cracking down on, I guess it was fake news was the term they were using, and all these different types of, or obsessive or offensive material. It seems like that was about a year ago. I'd say at least, maybe a little more. But ever since then, I mean, numbers have plummeted. The viewership, subscribership, everything has plummeted, and it's very discouraging. You know, you get frustrated because you put a lot of effort into the work, and it feels like you can't reach as many people as we could have, or we were reaching, say, in 2016. It was just a totally different realm then.
Yeah, you know what, that's so true. But I'll add this to it, and I've been changing my attitude about it a little bit personally, just thinking, because I do get a lot of comments and fresh emails from new people saying, wow, I felt led to find this channel. I'm glad I did. Whatever, you know, they find it whatever way. So, and I've always said this for years, and I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal. I'm saying for anybody who's in a position like ours, who's kind of trying to teach people things, you know, that the student will always find the teacher. You know, I believe that, you know, and I think they're led by the Holy Spirit. That's what matters. And whether they have it or not, you know, the lost will still find us as well. You know, God's still guiding them as well, I believe. So
That's a
you
great
know, right, the people that need to find us will. And you know, in fact, I just saw a YouTube channel today called Think About It, and they're pretty popular, and they've been around for a while. And he did a video saying that he's no longer uploading on YouTube. He's finished because he's mad at the censorship and stuff. And he left his comments off. I was even going to say something like, come on, man, don't give up. I mean, now's the time we really need people to be praying for their, you know, for their channel protection, having people help pray for that stuff as well. And, you know, for their personal protection as well. And just continue, and, you know, not to discourage new people out there trying, you know, even though YouTube's being such a jerk about everything. You know, we got to keep trying, guys. They want us to give up.
Absolutely. I think if anything, this should give you a little more enthusiasm. This should actually be more inspiring to actually get out there and say something, because of the censorship. Even though it does seem that the audiences are shrinking and our ability to reach is extremely limited, it still shows you that the truth is trying to be covered up. We're being silenced here. So if anything, it should just get you mad, and mad enough to create. So I'd say, even for people who are just starting today, dive in. And you know what? This is what I've always thought. From the moment I started YouTube, from the moment when I had 2 subscribers, I could even remember some of the subscribers, Brother Brent, Brother Carlos, and some others who were some of the first subscribers I had. And you know what? They would watch all my stuff. They would interact with me. And for me, it was like, I just need to put out truth in a way that's authentic, not only to me, but of course to the truth, and try my best to be diligent, to be thorough with my approach, and to be honest intellectually. And regardless of who watches or who receives the message or has the opportunity to find my work, as long as I know these things are there and are working, I feel I've done at least what God would ask.
Yeah.
Opposed to many other channels we see today that just put out a bunch of, I call it truth junk food, a bunch of nonsense just to pull in viewers. You know, half done research, regurgitated talking points, or just completely ripped off material.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Recycled material.
Yeah, I call them Illuminati conspiracy bottom feeders. You know, it's been because there used to be, you know, remember there was an industry. It got so popular for a while, it became an industry. Conspiracy did, and people were making lots of money, and people were making lots of videos, and there was lots of, you know, oh, this Illuminati symbol in this movie, you know, but I mean, with no deeper context, also with no, you know, a lot of times with nothing to compare it to. You know, I've mentioned that before. I know you knew that, but you know, these symbols are now a part of all of our consciousness. So some people are just creative and may put it in. You know, we have to think about, you know, what's the movie saying? You know, what's going on? Are there other symbols and signs? But absolutely. I know what you mean. You know, hey, I wanted to ask too. Then, so you named your channel Dayz of Noah. Now, what are your feelings on that? About where we're at right now with things?
Well, great question. That's exactly why I named the channel Dayz of Noah. Of course, I was a little inspired by a specific upload of Brother Theo of the Unplug Him channel called Dayz of Noah, where he kind of broke down a lot of this, and it was so good, and so that was part of the inspiration. But the other side was that I felt like not only are we in the Dayz of Noah, but I should actually name the channel that, because that's pretty much what I want to describe. That's pretty much what I want to discuss, or at least demonstrate visually how today, the times we're living in are very similar to the days of Noah. So yeah, I definitely do believe the times we are in now are, they do resemble, though it's different because it's a different time, different culture, everything's different altogether. But there are specific similarities that I think at least make it a true statement.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to look at the scripture. We'll go through it. It's not going to take long, and see what they're describing, and then kind of take a look at what's happening now. You cool with that?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Cool, man. So I'm going to share the screen there. We're going to hide that, and there we go. Let me jump over here and check this out, guys. Okay, so here we go. I looked all over. I found a bunch of different examples, but this one right here was really clean cut, straight to the point. So what was it like in the days of Noah? It says the biblical account of Noah begins in Genesis 6. Approximately 1,600 years had passed since the creation of Adam and Eve. As the earth's population exploded in number, it also exploded with evil. Long forgotten was the righteous sacrifice of Abel, as the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Verses 11 and 12 say, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. However, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. When Jesus described the events that will surround his second coming, he said, just as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Jesus was pointing out that although the people of Noah's day were totally depraved, they were not the least bit concerned about it. They were carrying on the events of their lives without a single thought of the judgment of God. Noah is described as a preacher of righteousness, meaning he had spent years warning his friends and neighbors what the holy God was about to do, but no one listened. The depravity and ungodly lifestyles of the entire world at that time were enough to cause the Lord to regret that he had made man. That's heavy if you think about that. That is heavy, right?
Very heavy.
Wow. Many scholars believe that part of the need to destroy every human being except Noah and his family was the sin mentioned in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, when the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. As evil reproduced and overtook the world, the most merciful act God could perform was to start over. It's interesting that God allowed Noah nearly 100 years to complete the building of the ark. Through all that time, God patiently waited. Scripture seems to imply that Noah preached to the people of that time about what was coming. They did not believe Noah and were content with their wickedness and idolatry. Their hearts were hard and their ears dull. No one repented and no one cared to seek God. Jesus said that the world will be much the same before he returns to set up his earthly kingdom. He warned us to be ready because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 4 gives us a clear picture of the state of the world before Jesus comes, and most likely also describes the world in the days of Noah. That verse says, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves. And again, we're thinking of modern times, right? People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, unquote. It's becoming increasingly obvious that to understand what the world was like in the days of Noah, we only need to watch the evening news. And that's the article. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one. What are your first thoughts?
Well, first thoughts would be, first off, I don't think it's very difficult to, draw some parallels here as far as what we're seeing day to day. But what I do want to say is some might argue, well, first off, every generation, every era has this argument about, oh, we're in the last days, or
that's true.
These are the days of Noah.
Yeah.
So let's start there. First, I'd like to say, but though there has always been, let's just use the term rebellion. There's always been, let's use the term rebellion to just kind of be a place marker for this entire thing you've read there. So there's been rebellion in every generation, just like there's rebellion in this generation. But one thing that I find very important is the difference between what we would consider mass culture or normative culture, like what's most popular, what's most accepted, what's promoted by the state. Okay, so if you, whatever the state is promoting, that tends to be what the consensus, the cultural consensus is, the accepted, the status quo, if you will. Now, all these other eras, people may say that, all these other eras, people may talk about and mention that there were rebellious, or there was rebellion. All these different eras, the status quo still promoted somewhat of a godly, or at least a Christian based, moral based type of community or type of state. But what we're seeing today is quite the opposite. Today we're seeing the state promote this type of degeneracy and rebellion. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing the state promote all of these things that you're reading in scripture there. Now, some could probably argue Rome, was different, and in Egypt. We can go into different eras and discuss that. But at the same time, they did have their own forms of theology, or at least pantheism, which would entail some type of moral code that's definitely inconsistent, but still they had their own sense of morality to a degree, or sense of some type of spiritual or religious cohesion. Today, that is disappearing. Today, secular humanism is taking over. Atheism is on the rise. Scientism is pretty much controlling our entire state. And this whole movement of nihilism is taking over. You did an excellent video recently on that, and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man.
I really want to touch on some points you made in that video tonight.
Great. I'd love it.
It was very, very to the point, but at the same time, deep enough for people to really get a grasp on what nihilism is, because most people tend to not fully understand how it is affecting society today. But basically, that's what I was getting at. We can really use this argument today and say, no, it's a little different in this case, because I think today we are seeing even the mainstream start to take on this new demonic, anti-Christian perspective that's extremely rebellious in a way that I don't think we've ever really seen. Now, of course, I'm sure there could be some historical arguments for that, and I wouldn't mind addressing those. But if we really pay attention to the things we're seeing, from transhumanism to the progressive movement, and of course, Agenda 2030, which I want to touch on a little bit, I really think we could see a clear parallel to Dayz of Noah.
You know what a good qualifier is to kind of see how far we've come? For me, is I look back sometimes, my parents, my dad especially, he still watches a lot of old 1950s and 60s TV shows sometimes. And when I'll go over there, he'll be watching some of that. It always occurs to me, because I'll see commercials for the other shows. And again, yes, there was programming and those things as well. I've covered that, especially the alien contact type stuff that was happening in a lot of the 50s movies, but that's a whole other story. But the point is, most of it was genuinely, at least on screen, very sweet, regardless of what was going on behind the scenes. But it was all sweet, had nice stories, little morality tells. Almost everything I see him watching, it still has a nice, tidy, sweet ending. Everything works out, everyone's happy, and right. And then what happened is, now you look at what's happening today. That is a literal inverse of what we used to see. I mean, it's the exact opposite. Now, remember, the Osbournes had a family show, and they were like the biggest thing for 8 years or something. So that's just one example. We got Lucifer, we got Sabrina the Teenage Witch, where they show kids having orgies and stuff for Satan, and in front of Baphomet and all this. I mean, just some craziness, man. So yeah, that's I think that's a good qualifier, an easy way to show people. Just say, look at this and look at that.
Oh yeah. I mean,
you know what I mean?
even just Netflix alone. You just send someone to the scroll feed on Netflix and just let them take a gander. I mean, it's so disturbing to see the type of content that is being put out for the mainstream. And I'm talking about children, teenagers, young adults, and even older generations are getting into this stuff and picking up on it and changing their own worldviews because they're being so influenced by this consensus today. And the consensus is a type of toxic postmodernism, I'd say.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you too on that note if you want to cover a little bit, and we're just going to keep flowing. That's kind of how we do. Because I will say too, for the people out there, when I look at the thing with the Days of Noah and are we actually in it right now? Here's, I don't want to say I'm playing devil's advocate. I'll never say that, but I'll say I'm going to take a kind of different approach because I do question something. So in the Bible, Noah they were the last, like there were 8 people that were saved, and that was pretty much it. And the rest of the world was corrupt, essentially, is the idea, right? So we get, to here now, and of course it's not to that level yet, maybe, I mean, I feel like maybe it's not quite that bad the way I think it, and maybe it is, but if it's not, I wonder if that's going to connect with when they connect everybody, when they give them the quote mark. And I'm sure there's, I've covered that a lot, but I see a lot of technology that'll actually pull us into virtual, not us, but the people who take it into virtual reality. And I think then I can understand it'll be a constant sinful mind, just entertainment or lust or, whatever it is. But, you see where I'm kind of going with this. But on the other hand, I understand people's hearts could be all turned over too, because we see what most churches have become, especially the popular ones and the big ones. We see Kanye's on the rise, which is a shame. I don't even... Do you think that's, we're going to go into some kooky territory. Do you think that's the real Kanye?
Wow. Well, first, let me touch on, that was a lot there. Let me touch on a couple things. You just made so many really good points. So first off, I like this idea about connecting everyone through some type of technological means, as like a Borg almost. And I think this is the future as far as this society is concerned. I think that's the direction we're going in. I believe that's where Agenda 2030 aims to take us. I believe this is exactly what we are seeing with all the new forms of technology. If you notice, everything is becoming more connected, and you are now needing to have less things because everything is connected into one single device. Now our phones are like multi-purpose computers, and eventually they will be shrunk down to a point where we can actually ingest them or have them inserted into us or injected into us some way. But yeah, I think that's definitely coming as far as the near future is concerned. I think we have some time. I think personally, I believe there's a slow breakdown is needed. And that's what we're experiencing now. We're experiencing a slow, systematic, incremental breakdown of our minds and our hearts. So what I mean by that is our minds seem to be being broken down incrementally through bad education, false education, revisionist history, right? We see this now. They're trying to remove old statues and almost rewrite history in a way that seems nicer, right? So we're losing our understanding of our past. We're being detached from our present via social media and technology. Therefore, we don't know where we're going. The old saying,
oh man, that's so true.
If you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're at, nor where you're going. And I see this system happening. It's a cycle. And so that's how the mind is being destroyed, and our hearts are being destroyed through a lack of morality that is being replaced by amorality. Amorality meaning that there really is no such thing. It's not necessarily immoral, because if something's immoral, that means logically there has to be something moral. What we're experiencing today is a new culture of amorality where, hey, your truth is your truth. There is no real sense of what's wrong.
Man, and look at how they confuse people with, on one hand, now you got fake news, which we already knew, but now it's so prominent and always displayed and talked openly about. So on the other hand, you got all these new pronouns and new ways we're describing ourselves, and the trans stuff and the Baphomet stuff and all this.
Exactly.
So, right. So people are just cuckoo, crazy confused, don't know what to do, which way we going. This is why, you and I know, and a lot of the people listening tonight know, that And that, again, I'm not a preacher, pastor, or priest, but I know this much: Jesus is it. We need an anchor in reality and truth, and
Amen.
right. And when you look at his walk, how can you deny that? And I've had people say, "What if you're wrong?" And my thing is, you know what? If I turned out to be wrong, at least I genuinely, because I do genuinely try to follow in his ways. I'm certainly not close to it, but I work on things, and he helps me be a better person. So whatever. Oh, I was just under a delusion, but you know what? It made me the very best person I could be. I can say that.
Absolutely. I mean, the old Pascal's wager, right? Of course, I agree with that. Now, of course, skeptics and atheists would argue against that, but I say there's many ways to argue for our worldviews. And I don't even think that's very important, especially right now, because we're all believers. I would think here, so we're not gonna contend for the faith or do an apologetic here. But I definitely agree with you on that. I mean, especially when you look at the results of things like nihilism, when you look at the absurdity of things like atheism and materialism, when you look at the logical ends of scientism, it's even someone that is completely ignorant to all of these ideals, if you can just give them a small idea of where this ends, it's death. So there's no other angle. It's death. It's replacement by other forms of technology. I want to talk a little bit about that. Yeah. So that it's common sense. Unfortunately, many people today, they've been manipulated in a way. And especially, I go back to the mind and the heart. Their mind is confused because they learned a bunch of garbage through this false education system, and of course the fake news and the mainstream media. But their hearts are out of place. They no longer have a foundation for morality. They no longer understand what truth is. So they have no way to fight against all of these attacks. There's nothing to protect them and guard them and give them strength. Hence, of course, Christ, right? Salvation, right? So it's so easy to figure out, but again, it's amazing how it's so difficult, especially for the younger generations today, to understand this. And it's usually because they're led by their flesh, right? They just want to have fun, they want to get high, they want that instant gratification, they're addicted to dopamine. It's madness. But
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, you're into you're into subcultures and groups. I think I'm that way too. You know what I mean? Like, don't you like to study the way groups work and people?
Oh yeah, man. I'm very, very much so fascinated with behavior, cultural group behavior, subcultures, genre. I'm very fascinated with God's creation and the multitude of variations that we express.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, but I just wanted to finish that with the Kanye thing.
Please.
Is Kanye, I did a video on Kanye. At first, I was trying to be very gentle. Honestly, I think a lot of people thought something was wrong with me because it wasn't a typical response from me regarding this whole Kanye thing. I was trying to be a little more understanding. I was trying to be gentle.
Right.
But
that was early on though, right?
That was right away. I've been watching and I've been seeing some things that aren't very good, the whole Osteen thing, and poor Kanye. All I got to say is the guy's fighting some serious demons, but I will say this. I know I could say for myself, it took me some time to really fully come around as a Christian. God works on everybody differently, and some people take a long time to really come to. And so I'm praying for him, like it would be a beautiful work of God to take someone as damaged as Kanye, right? And turn them into a son of God in that way. But, I'm rooting for it. I'm praying for it, but it's highly unlikely, man. Like,
I know.
He's
married into a coven of witches. We know some of this stuff, and we remember when he had his so-called breakdown because he was up on stage calling everything out and telling the truth about Jay-Z and all the record industry. Next thing you know, he's gone for a week, comes out. I covered this in the video as well. Comes out with blonde hair. And there's a lot of meaning there because I showed even with some of Fritz Springmeier's work, you can go back into the mind control slaves and whatnot. But
absolutely,
the blonde hair is a big part of programming. I showed where they did it to Katy Perry as well. And then she started having a breakdown after she had her blonde hair and talking about God and Jesus and stuff you never heard her talk about before. It's very strange. So I wonder if there's, I just realized, wow, I wonder if that's a part of it too. Man, wow, because I put some stuff in the video on Kanye about Katy Perry talking about God and Jesus lately too. I never even thought about that, but I wonder if maybe they're under the same kind of programming. Maybe that's why we're seeing more so-called Illuminati artists talking about their relationship with God and Christ.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it interesting? And
It is.
the thing is, the most we can do in this regard is speculate, right? And that's tough because
Yep.
that's the best we can do. But we do test the spirits and we watch. We're watchful, right? So I think that's all we can do. I'm trying my best not to judge too harshly. I'm trying to be as gentle and understanding as possible, but still stick to the
Yes.
truth, still follow what Scripture says, and you know, be critical. I that tends to be one of my only talents is critiquing things. You know what I mean? So
Well, I'm glad you have a heart about it. I'm the same way, you know, because I cover a lot of edgy topics and we look at a lot of people that are going through some weird things and, you know, promoting some bad things. But that's why I always say, you know, let's listen. This isn't to judge this person, not to make fun of them, not to rip them into shreds. You know, these people are under a control, you know, a dark control, a satanic control, one way or another, a lot of the ones we're looking at. So this isn't something to be mocked and ridiculed, but it is important for us to see it, again, to help us understand, are we actually in the days of Noah? How close are we? Sometimes I want to think pre-Days of Noah, but then I feel like a Days of Noah, like everybody completely going evil. And again, I see it as a connected thing. Like you said, could be a 2030 thing. If you guys don't know, you can look this up. You know, the Pope Agenda 2030, he's a big part of this. But look up the Pope meets with Silicon Valley, people from Silicon Valley. There's been a lot of crossover lately. He's even been meeting with some actual transhumanists and all this. So, you know, 2030, for all we know, really could be the launching of this new system. You know, so will it take that long? Will it not? I don't know. Again, I don't like to sit around. I don't date set. I don't like to get in, because what happens if I start thinking about rapture and stuff all the time and all that, it just takes away from my real life. You know, it's like I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to really worry about the rapture or think about it years ago. And I'd think like, oh my gosh, any second Jesus could show up, you know, and this is before I knew more about what the signs were and stuff. But I know a lot of people are still like that. A lot of people are just excited to go. A lot of people are done with this place. And I understand, guys, we're all strangers in a strange land. You know, if we know Christ and we're with God and everything, the Bible even tells us, you know, we don't belong here. You know, we belong there. But that doesn't mean that we have to give up or, you know, take our lives, God forbid, or anything like that. But, you know,
absolutely.
we're here for a reason, man. We got to fight. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about it. I mean, Scripture demonstrates many times over how struggle and strife and pain and destruction is part of the renewal. It's part of the pathway to Christ. It's part of the pathway to the kingdom. And, you know, we're supposed to have a merry heart. We're not supposed to be, you know, down in the dumps. I mean, where's your faith at? Right. So you should have the faith that all will be well eventually. This is just, this all is a test in a sense. Also, I wanted to bring up this idea of Agenda 2030. When I use that term, or when I mention that project, I'm not necessarily setting a date for the year 2030.
Right.
You know, and 2030 actually used to be Agenda 2021, I believe.
You know what? I'll throw this in quickly, man. I don't even think it'll be that long. I feel like everything's so close to being in place. I feel like, I wonder if Agenda 2030 is just kind of a red herring for people to focus on, but maybe it's really 5 years. I mean, heck, I don't know. But am I right? It seems like things are moving pretty quick. And there's the Trump factor, which, you know, he's a fascinating one to watch because my views on him change time to time and then back. And then there's so much about him that's just, it's very interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And there's some creepy things, you know, that I wonder, does he understand 5G is not going to be good? Does he understand red flag laws are bad for us? That's Minority Report. You know, this is pre-crime. Does he understand these things, or is he just, maybe he's busy with all the other stuff and letting it slide? But either way, he has done a lot of good stuff. One thing I've noticed is, and I was talking to a friend about this recently, this is off YouTube stuff, but have you noticed how many pedo rings have been busted worldwide in the last 3 years? I mean, it's huge. I mean, this is the most I've ever seen.
This is true. It's true. It's amazing how much is being exposed. Now, I would say how much is still going on. You know, that's the part that's a little creepy. Is like, yeah, we're being given these you know, it's kind of like Scooby-Doo, you know, when you catch the bad guy and you take the
Yeah,
mask off and it's like, oh, that's the bad guy, but actually there's probably a whole lot of other bad guys out
right.
there and a whole lot of other things going on. So I agree with the things you're saying here, especially with the possibility of things happening a lot sooner than they're projecting. I think that's a possibility, and I would say all of it's ballpark, right? The whole 2030 thing's ballpark. I think, moreover, it's putting out the ideas, putting out the structure, as you saw with the Green New Deal, which seemed to be a farce and a failure. But actually, these are things that they plan on really implementing, and I believe they will come close to fully accomplishing that. I don't think they're going to accomplish all of the things they want to, just because I believe the Father will intervene. But what I will say is that I do think these things will have to happen to a degree to bring forth judgment and to bring forth Christ, right? So I see Agenda 2030 entailing all things, including the mark. I believe the mark will just be part of this Agenda 2030 system. And Agenda 2030 is just some name that they've labeled it for now. Again, it was Agenda 21 before, so let's not get too connected to
Right.
the label, but it more is about this idea of technocratic globalism. I would even call it technopolic globalism, which refers to technopoly, which is a term that's been used by several theorists and philosophers. But I'd say probably the best source for this understanding would be Neil Postman. A lot of people are familiar with his work. Amusing Ourselves to Death, I believe, is probably one of his more popular pieces. I think I have every book he's written. But one of my favorites is his book Technopoly, where he really goes into how this works, and he breaks it down from the way technology has, basically explains how technology has developed over time into the 21st century, or at least into the 20th century. And what I like about it is the book kind of ends off, you know, I'd say at least before we got the type of technology we have today. So I can take what he's saying and then parallel that to what we're seeing today and really glean some serious insights from it. And he made this argument of tool using societies. That's what we would see, say, you know, I'd say at least before the industrialization. We would say probably in the Renaissance, Dark Ages, and in these times we had the tool using societies. And then once industry was created, I'd say, especially after Newton and the Enlightenment, we would get this technocracy. And then from technocracy, it would develop into technopoly. And the difference between the technocracy and the technopoly is that the technocracy is attacking the culture. It's damaging the culture in a way that is not only changing the culture, but creating a culture that is codependent on the technology. Now, what technopoly is, and this is the arguments he made in his book, technopoly is where technology is the culture, where technology and the culture are merged, where technology and man are merged. And I feel that's where we are getting. And this just really reminds me, especially when we discuss the Nephilim and the mixing of genetics and DNA and all of these things that Scripture teaches. I can see all of these things being demonstrated very easily in this technopolic type of time, where we can't really tell the difference between technology and human existence. And that's very easy to see already due to the way we communicate, our education. Everything is through screens. The way we meet people today is through screens. Children today that are, say, under 12 years old, or let's just say children from 4 to 13, you know, where socialization begins. These children of those ages today are being socialized on technology and through technology. They're not interfacing with humans like we have in all the older generations. So what we're doing is we're having a new rewiring of the human brain, a new corruption of the spirit by way of all of this technology, because at the end of the day, it's all spiritual. But
Yeah.
I see all of these things happening incrementally that's working towards the 2030 agenda, which is based on a system that is a technopoly. It only can work within a technopoly, which presents a type of communistic society, right? Because everyone has to be grouped together, equal, subdued in a way, you know, and kind of appeased through the loins, appeased through the desire, similar to how Aldous Huxley explained in Brave New World. People won't even know they're enslaved because they're so high, or they're having so much sex and so much fun that they don't complain. They don't need much.
Yes, that's so true. You guys haven't ever read Brave New World? I'd read it. They also made a movie in the 70s, which was okay. It was okay. It's pretty good. But I suggest reading it. And Aldous Huxley was one of these guys that was very connected. And it reminds me of kind of an Albert Pike situation where he wrote about the 3 world wars, and people were like, he predicted the 3 world wars. It was like, no, man, he was a part of the system. Those people who have been here since the beginning, working in the shadows, you know, some of them Masons, some of them other things. I think it's a culmination of different secret societies that have been working essentially for Lucifer on this earth for a very long time, maybe even back to, they say Nimrod was the original Freemason, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah. That is the lore.
Yeah.
I haven't done enough in-depth research on that to really pull out any sources, but I've heard a lot of that, especially just the idea of operative masonry, right? Not speculative masonry, but I definitely think that's kind of where it all started, right? This idea of the secret societies having to figure out ways to maintain their I'd say their orders, you know, because there were these ancient orders, and you know, some even make these arguments for the Melchizedek, I believe it's called, the Order of Melchizedek.
Yeah.
You know, so that when you get that far back, that area of research I probably have done the least amount of research.
Let me ask you about something I know you have done research on, because when you're talking about the technocracy, right? Or was that the word?
Well, it's technocracy, and then it develops into a technopoly. It's almost like socialism into communism. You could kind of look at it that way.
But on the way to that, and thank you, and on the way to that, though, we are all being connected. And I found something else, and I'm sure you've probably seen this as well. This actually goes way back for me. I remember, and this is back when I was still in the military. I was in the Coast Guard for 8 years. I was stationed in Alaska at this point. And I remember going to the local commissary to get something, and there was a Time magazine. And on the cover of it, it was a couple in their 50s, a man and a woman. But they were all dressed real hipster-like with, you know, cool tats and earrings. And this is a long time ago. This is something I was in the military, I don't know, guys, maybe 15 years ago or something. It's been a long time ago. But and the cover of the magazine said, everybody's hip and that's not cool. And I went ahead and bought it, and I read it. And I remember really being interested in that article. And this is, again, a long time ago, and seeing it coming, you know, like there is a day coming where everybody will be cool, you know, how, you know, everyone's going to be hip. Everyone's going to be connected, you know, in the same way. And we see that happening totally right now. I see it with, I mean, Google, of course, is a monster, but we see it on all kinds of commercials for all kinds of products. It's always hipsters, hip people, you know, and we see it manifesting in our world around us. I live in the Midwest, so it hasn't completely taken over here. But I do see it, elements of it, you know, older people, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, wanting to be hip and cool. I'm Generation X, and we're the ones who kind of got into the tattoos. That was the tattoo thing really started with Generation X. You know, even us, I sit around thinking, wow, and that's just one aspect of the Gen X, but what are we going to look like, you know, when we're in our 70s and 80s, if we make it that far?
Oh, man.
Yeah, right? And then what about these new people coming up under us? Because another thing I wanted to bounce off, the reason I asked you also about, I know you like studying kind of the way groups work and whatnot. It's interesting. If you look at right now, a lot of the Antifa and people like this, and a lot of the just kind of loony kind of SJW stuff is people in their early 20s, late teens. And if you follow that generation a bit, maybe mid 20s, this is the generation that literally grew up on Common Core, you know, and this is another part of that dumbing down process. So, you know, a lot of these kids came up through high school, again, being just dumbed down worse than anything I've ever seen. Common Core was terrible. And that's just one example, but you know what I mean? I guess you follow it. We already know there's a wicked spirit in schools, because every week there's another Jezebel getting caught, you know, sleeping with these young boys. It's
absolutely.
Go ahead.
This is so true. Now you're touching on education, which is like one of the pillars, right? We have, you know, politics, culture, pop culture, education, and and several others, but education is an important pillar, because this is what basically molds, it shapes and molds, or I would say, especially after John Dewey's coming into the picture, socializing society. School post John Dewey was all about socializing. It wasn't about educating in a sense that would give people tools to use in the real world and develop healthy families and start businesses and be successful. It was more about creating tools for the society or for the industries. And you look a little bit more into John Dewey and you see all, you see his worldview, you see all the councils he's involved in, and all the different people he's connected with. So it all makes sense. But you're really touching on something here. There's another book, Christopher Lasch wrote a book called The Minimal Self, which really touches on this idea of the corruption of the education system, especially post 1950, where curriculum started completely changing to the point where they would be removing a lot of the classical forms of education, like logic and rhetoric and semantics and these types of things that help people understand how to make meaning and how to understand the English language, argumentation, truth, falsehoods, these types of things. They've removed this whole aspect of education, so we no longer can really understand how to make sense of the world around us. We no longer know how to readily spot logical inconsistencies or falsehoods, making it easier for us to be manipulated and fooled. Mind you, they would add in this new, he made this argument about like life lessons, like school became about learning how to be in the world, in a sense, where no longer was the family raising the children and raising the youth and teaching them about life and how to make it. Instead, you learn these things in school. He used the example of home ec, where we're learning how to do things around the home in school, when these are things that should be taught in the home. Basically, he makes an argument that the state has slowly replaced the parent in the school system, therefore becoming the parent and the socialization platform for the future, for society. And we're seeing this, and it's all demonic when you realize the minds behind it. None of them are believers, and if they are, they're usually some type of mystic. They don't have a real Christian worldview, and of course they're tied into the industries and everything, so they're pretty much limited to what they can do. And also, Thomas Sowell had a really good argument as well. I can't remember the name of the book, but he demonstrated how when you study test scores in education, how since about the same kind of time, 1950 on, test scores drop pretty much exponentially year to year. And so not only are we getting worse education, but we're actually becoming less intelligent. And not to say intelligence isn't as important as the spirit, but the spirit has left the society a long time ago, as far as any mainstream sense of it is concerned, right? They took scripture out of school. I believe in the 60s they stopped using scripture in 1964 maybe. And that same year you had Miss Calderon, who introduced the sex ed industry, who introduced sex ed into the education system in 1964. So, and of course, we know that's right around the civil rights movement. That's right around the time when the Beat generation was really making a big impact, or had been making an impact since the 50s. So this is when neoliberalism and the sexual revolution, all of these things started to bubble. And what follows that? Around, say, 1968, you get the Club of Rome releasing the whole environmentalist movement. What happens in 1970? You get Earth Day started in San Francisco, along with the gay movement. That was the exact same year that is following the feminist second wave. And you had the Limit of Growth Club of Rome funded book that scared the crap out of everybody and pretty much launched this whole hyper environmentalist movement. You had, what else? The Population Bomb, that Paul Ehrlich, I believe that came out the same year, around that time. The Population Bomb, of course, it's this scary book that scared everybody. You know, we're overpopulated, right? It's all a Malthusian, Thomas Malthus kind of perspective,
right?
Which is which is what brought us eugenics, or I would call it dysgenics. And what was that? Oh yeah. So I'm just gonna kind of flow with this thread
Oh,
here.
you're doing great. You're dropping great knowledge. I love it. Just happy to have you, man. You know that. So please just continue on the flow, and we'll keep going like that. I may jump in here and there and add a thing or two, you know, but yeah, man, this is all good stuff.
I appreciate it, because I run my lives the same way. I just kind of flow and let my mind go. So
yep,
it's worked the best way. So and another Thomas Sowell reference, I believe it was in, what was that? Economic Fallacies. Gosh, what was the name of that book? Economic Facts and Fallacies. He makes the argument and actually provides a source saying, I think less than 5% of the U.S. land area is developed. I think it was forests of the United States cover 6 times as much land as all the cities combined. So when you think about that just alone, right, just the United States, less than 5% of the country is developed. How are we overpopulated in any sense where we're running out of land, we're running out of space, right? We have tons of space, we have tons of resources. But I believe, especially when you look at some statistics and you start to pay attention to some of the rhetoric, it just makes sense that they're trying to fool us into this idea that we're overpopulated so they can push us into the cities. And that's the whole purpose, pushing people into mass cities. When people are all cramped into cities, they're easier to control. When people are spread out all over the place in rural lands, raising big families on large acres of land with animals, and being able to like we call it today, off the grid, able to subsist off the nature of the earth, off of what God has provided us, in our own communities that we create based on our own worldviews, this ability to live freely in that sense. To quell that, they want to push everybody into mass cities so they can enforce specific laws, and they can enforce a specific culture by way of course, media. It's very easy to use media to manipulate people when you have them all in front of you in cramped in a space where you could just force all types of propaganda and information on them. It's a lot harder to do that when people are spread out on land and just spending their time raising their families and making food and building things and selling things to survive.
Do you have a bug out plan?
I do. Yes, I've definitely prepared for that.
Yeah, me too. I think it's
prepared for several years now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing for people to do. You know, I don't do a lot of videos on that or anything. But maybe I should talk about it in some live show or something, you know, because I'm definitely not the master at it. But, you know, I've got a plan. I've already got stuff set up, and, you know, we're good to go. Because, again, it doesn't have to be just for the end of the world, you know, because I got my parents involved in this. We have a house out by a lake. They do. And that's a place we can go. So for the last few years, I have my parents just take extra cans of food. And I'm always like, hey, what if there's a tornado or something bad? So we have there's a well there. You know what I mean? So it's a good setup. I hope it never comes to that. But then again, like, I don't worry about that. You know, you may be the same way. I mean, if we're here for that, then my prayer will be, or I guess he'll guide us. Not guess. I know he will be guided one way or the other. But sometimes I wonder, am I going to be fighting during this, or am I going to be hiding during this? Or am I just going to say, you know what? If I didn't have anyone here to protect or anything, it'd be like, just take me, man. I'm done. You know what I mean? Is that what you do? Just have your head taken? Or, you know, I don't know.
I'm fearless in that sense, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
I never worry. That's one thing I don't do when it comes to this type of stuff. It's like, for one, I'm grounded in Christ. I'm grounded in the truth. I'm on the right side. I have a scripture that plays everything out in a way that is understandable. So for me, it's like, I'm letting the Most High God do his thing, you know, and I'm just trying to be some type of instrument during this entire transaction that we're experiencing here. So I have no fear at all. And of course, that doesn't mean we don't prepare. You know, that doesn't mean we just throw our hands up and say, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to wait for all of this, you know, to end. No, I'm going to prepare. You know, I'm going to do the right things. I'm going to stay on the right path. But at the same time, I'm not going to worry about it.
Right. We can't be freaking out.
No, man.
I wanted to bounce, and I really like your response, man. That's a great attitude to have. Exactly, just fearless, you know. And
Yeah,
I've
completely.
talked about that on some shows because we're told multiple times in the Bible about fear not, be fearless, and that's key. And then, although it's a delicate walk I've done for many years, but the type of stuff I do is stuff that I use to reach the world. You know, I've done it for many years now, and it is scary stuff, and I get that. But I'm, you know, some people know my history. I went to film school and used to be a writer and wanted to be a director of horror and science fiction. So it all just kind of worked out when I got, you know, figured out my gifts, you know, my Holy Spirit gift for the things I do matched with my creative stuff and then my, you know, what I'm into. And then all of a sudden, wow, there is a whole world out there of programming. There really is a lot of these signs and symbols. What do these mean, you know? But we all have our own process. But I wanted to bounce back the one something else you'd mentioned earlier. I think it's interesting back in the 60s when all this stuff really started to manifest that they were calling it the age of Aquarius. And that really is, you know, to me, the fifth age, the last age of man anyway. And I remember reading a Farmer's Almanac a long time ago, and it was talking about the different ages, you know, and it was talking about how the end of the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius, there are going to be a lot of crazy signs. And some of the signs are the end of institutions, the end of you know, certain big corporate systems. And anyway, the way it read and the way it's playing out, I feel this is just me, is we've seen the end of the film industry. All right. We're also seeing that whether Trump meant to or not, he's totally exposed the left-right paradigm. And yeah, remember Newt Gingrich saying he wouldn't make it in because he wasn't one of the members of the secret societies. I mean, come on, you know. But then I know there's arguments on the other side too that he's probably being used by, you know, somebody else. What are your thoughts on Trump? Actually, I just want to throw that out about the age of Aquarius too. But
yeah,
everything.
Yeah, these are really important things here. I believe Marilyn Ferguson wrote a book called The Aquarius Conspiracy, I think was the name of it, and that was kind of pushed around as, you know, a real truth book. But actually, I think I haven't read it in its completion, but from what I gather, she's really just kind of pushing this new age monism to fight against the machine. You know, it's kind of like a neo-pagan argument against it. But I do see this idea of the Aquarius or the Aquarian type of spirit, if you will, that's been explained through the occult does seem to be present. It does seem to resonate with the idea. It also reminds me of the Crowleyan type of philosophies, especially when you look at the what did he call it? The conquering child, the curious and conquering child. I really see this. We're seeing this before us, especially with the Greta Thunberg character that is the poster child for Agenda 2030. And basically, I believe Agenda 2030 is the scientism / transhumanism program. And Trump is interesting, man. I'll tell you right now, I have an ability to see things for what they really are, but still be able to enjoy surface things about them. So it's like you can't be serious all the time. You can't let all of this stuff get to you. You gotta have a little fun. You gotta enjoy life in the fleshly sense a little bit, right? We're supposed to deny the flesh, of course, but we are supposed to at least experience the world. Why would we be in these material bodies otherwise? But the reason I bring that up is because I think Trump is funny. I think he's a troll. I think he's entertaining. You know, I
think he is too. Yeah, I get a kick out of it.
Yeah, his personality, I kind of dig it sometimes, right? But that's just on a very surface level. I'm talking about just mere or pure entertainment. But if we're talking about deep politics, if we're talking about socio-cultural issues, if we're talking about this type of stuff, you know, I don't really know, honestly. I don't really know if Trump is in on all of this or if he's just some pawn that's being used to kind of bring all of this stuff forth. I don't know. You know, Brother Theo made a great argument. We were talking on the phone one time, and he was saying how Trump is being used as a conservative ploy or a right-wing ploy to kind of make Christianity look bad or pollute the Christian worldview, or pollute Christianity as a movement in society by making everyone hate Christianity because he's this white cisgender Christian male who's causing all of this chaos in the world. And see, this is why we need to get rid of Christianity, because it creates these men like these, very similar to the authoritarian personality that we got from Frankfurt School.
Think about this real quick, too. Just want to interject quickly. Who was the first person after Kanye came out of the hospital with blonde hair? Who did he go get a big picture with and spend time with? Trump.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Great point.
You guys can find that picture. They're standing next to each other. Kanye's got the blonde hair. Just saying. Don't know exactly what it means. But this stuff happens. Remember, I've shown people in the past, Julian Assange, many years ago. This is like 6-7 years ago. Lady Gaga went and visited him dressed up as a witch, and she went and spent like several hours in his room with him and came out, and just everything normal, just dropping by.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. They send Pam Anderson out there to do the same thing. And then, they're sending Rodman out to hang out with Kim Jong-un. So, I mean, it just made me right. Like, I mean, I just
weird. Are you with me? Yeah. It's just weird, man. I'm telling you that it's fascinating. As much as some of this stuff is dark and not necessarily joyful, it's hilarious. It's just clown world. It's like,
yes, that's the attitude.
I can't help but find the fun in this stuff. And I don't mean like I'm having fun, but it's just so absurd that some of this stuff you have to just kind of laugh at. And especially when you know where it's all going. You know what this is all leading to. And as long as you're on the right side, you're doing the right things, you're in the walk, right? You're walking in Christ.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty safe to operate that way. Earlier, you mentioned this idea of element of cool, or this idea of cool things being cool.
Yeah, everyone has to be cool. Arrested Development, in adults.
Development. Yes, it's so important.
The rise of the thoughts too. But go ahead.
Yes, exactly. This was something that we saw injected into society, or should I say culture, directly out of the 60s movement. And from there is when this whole kind of toxic progressivism started, because we're only here now because of that movement of then. And I would say, as far as globalism is concerned, well, there's many historical arguments we can make, but Woodrow Wilson was really one that kind of gave up the United States to become this, I'd say, this cheerleader for globalism. And of course, he hired Edward Bernays to be his public propagandist. So from that point forward, we could kind of see it all unfold. But I'm a Gen X as well, so I saw all of this stuff happen, especially in the 80s. So I know what you mean by that, by seeing such a big change, especially from, say, the 90s to what we're seeing now. I'd even say from the 2000s. You could look at 2001 or pre 9/11. So say 2000 or 1999. It's just, we're living on a different planet, right?
Yeah. What do you think about the rise of thought culture? I mean, one of the reasons I ask too is because I always have these just different ideas about the future of where I'll continue on a platform. And I've even thought, if everything went crazy on YouTube and everything else, there's always the whole thing where one day maybe I'll show myself. And if I did, maybe what if I actually went and did a Twitch, and I could just talk 8 hours a day just about all the stuff that's happening in the world, and I'm not saying I'm going to do this. I never wanted to be on camera. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not ashamed of myself or anything. Like, it's not like that. It's just that I don't want to be a celebrity. I never wanted to be something like that. I don't like being put on pedestals. I'll get really angry emails sometimes. I got one from someone a few weeks ago really cussing me out for praying at the end of my live shows, but sometimes talking about edgy stuff, and, but to me, the second I see that, that's a Pharisee. This is just another one of those legalistic spirits, and I just won't have it, But are you with me? So you get a lot of this stuff too, and you got people that also want to try to control you, and the way you are. No, how dare you mention Jesus, but then you'll talk about this or say that or joke about things and stuff. And
oh man,
yeah, even that goes back to the humor thing. That's one of the reasons I wanted to start doing live shows and stuff, because my videos are always more serious, but at least I could show people my personality, that I am easygoing. I do like to joke about stuff. and hopefully it helps. You know, that we don't have to be fire and brimstone with this stuff. We don't have to be fearful. A lot of people are real fear porn out there into this stuff, you know, that just make you feel fearful, you know, when you hear them. That's all over the place, you know, and that's why over the years I stopped using. I'm using it in the movie, by the way, because it is the scariest movie ever made, but I don't use it in videos as much anymore. But I used to use the scary music, you know, and stuff and all that. But even a lot of that stuff's fallen away over the years. But at the same time, it worked, you know, everything happens. You know how it is with your creation of videos too. It all works itself out as long as you're on the right path, praying about it and stuff. No matter how it changes, it's always going to change for the better. You know, things are going to continue evolving and getting better, you know.
I agree. I really do. And what you're bringing up is it's pretty serious, man. I'll tell you, there's been moments where I was just going to stop. I just wasn't going to make any more videos. I was just going to just give it all up because of these types of, you know, attacks, you know, people it's like people want you to be what they want to see, right? It's pretty unfortunate. And I think it has to do with a certain type. Well, I'll say this: the internet attracts, I'd say it attracts everyone, of course, but there tends to be a larger population of certain types on the internet. For instance, trolling, right? Certain types of people are trolls. I personally believe, just based on testing spirits, it seems like trolls tend to be a certain even personality type in many ways, or they have experienced certain things in their life that have caused them pain, caused them self-hate, caused them frustration, spiritual possession, and these types of things, to the point where they take out their aggression online. I totally get it. I understand it. I don't take these things personally at all, ever, right? But I do get that the internet is a breeding ground for this type of thing, because there's no way for anyone to be accountable for anything. And I'm writing a book right now that we could talk about in a little bit here, but I really go into some of these ideas of this new postmodern youth, mainly the postmodern male. I talk about women as well in the book, but I really go into this new culture that we're experiencing now.
Oh, cool, man. I'm excited for that. You can go ahead and jump into a little bit if you like. I mean, just keep going with your flow, but I'm interested to hear
maybe I'll segue into that. Yeah.
The whole reason I brought up Twitch again is the whole kind of thought thing, you know, that it's that hoe over there, folks. If you're a boomer, you might not know that. No, but really, you know, and that's like a real subculture there. I can't even call it subculture. It's actually really big and it's kind of mainstream there, but it's usually really, you know, young, very attractive ladies, scantily clad, you know, and just showing themselves off on camera, and that's all they do. And they play video games and they make money. They get sponsorships and stuff. And some of
the e-thought, right?
Right, the e-thought. And it's just, but that also goes back to kind of what cell phones did for us too. Is that just fed into a narcissist or a Jezebel spirit in a lot of ways, a narcissistic culture.
Exactly.
And has us all. I don't take pictures of myself. Again, not that I'm ashamed of myself, but I don't like being in pictures. You know, maybe it's the Indian in me. I'm scared of it, you know, but I just don't like, I've always been anti that. I don't know about you, but that's just, go ahead.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I'm very much so the same. I don't like attention at all. I tend to stick to myself. I'm more of an introverted type. I tend to be more interested in ideas and how people work opposed to actual people, unfortunately.
Are you an INFP by chance, or an INFJ?
I tend to test. I've taken the test many times, and I tend to always test INTP.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But I do definitely have some. I definitely kind of vibe with some of the INFP structure. But I guess I tend to focus more on ideas in that sense. So that what puts me in the INTP camp.
Yeah.
But I definitely am more of the introverted type, and I think we find a lot of us on the internet. This is an area where we could kind of be ourselves and not have to worry about what, you know, people think about us, or have to deal with that extra energy sucking nature of socializing with many people that we tend to experience. And so basically what I was trying to get at was this new culture, as you mentioned, this thought culture, all of this stuff, even all this new garbage music. You know, we just had the death of Juice WRLD. I just recently dropped a video on that. And
what are your thoughts if you don't? Well, first finish your thought now, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on Juice World. Go ahead.
absolutely, absolutely. But I really believe that this technology, this especially this type of social media culture that we have now, it's literally a culture now. It's no longer a form of technology. It's an actual cultural norm to exist in reality by way of social media and social media only. Now, some might say, oh, well, you guys are on YouTube, you know, why are you talking about social media? Well, this is different. YouTube is a platform for ideas. It's a platform for people to actually spread information. It's not always about entertainment and cat videos and eating what is it, Tide Pods or whatever, right? This is an area where we can actually you could find education and you can educate. So I think YouTube is unique in that sense, but that's not as much of a problem as, say, Instagram or TikTok, you know, or all of these toxic platforms that are creating normative narcissism, and normative meaning that it's just how things should be. Today, you should be narcissistic. In fact, today we are encouraged to be narcissistic because we are constantly trying to get attention. Attention, I call them the attention industries. It's all the industries we're seeing today are the currency is attention. And now they're turning that attention into real currency, right? People are monetizing themselves. And I've never, and of course, I think this is more a personality thing, but I'm never concerned. I've never been concerned with utilizing my appearance. And of course, I have no problems with my appearance either. It's not that I'm afraid or I'm insecure. It's just, I don't like that type of attention. That's not what feeds me. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, just from my perspective, that's how I see that. But I do understand people are different. Some people like the attention, and just because you like engaging with people, say if you're more of an extroverted type of person, if you're more social in that sense, I don't think that's narcissistic. People want to get in front of a camera and get an audience. I think that is very normal for certain types of people, but it can become toxic. It can become a bit exaggerated and excessive, and that's when the narcissism starts to come in here. So there was something else I wanted to say. This idea of, well, let me just go to, I'll go to the Juice World thing. My argument for the Juice World situation was that it's sad. It's sad when anyone passes, right? Of course.
And do you mind telling the people? Some people might not be familiar with it.
Okay, so Juice World, and the funny thing is, a great amount of people in the comment sections of my video didn't know who he was. They were like, "Who is this guy?" And so he's just one of these run-of-the-mill types of rap artists. I'd say more so in the mumble rap genre. It's kind of the SoundCloud rap. People call it SoundCloud rap. It's extremely popular, mind you, but it's usually between the ages of, say, 13 and late 20s, or maybe even 25. That age range is pretty much up on these types of artists. Anyone after, say, 30, you probably don't know who they are. So just a very typical kind of drug rap artist. All they tend to do is rap about nihilism and drug use, and of course sexual degeneracy and all of these things.
Yeah, there's Smoke Perp, right?
Yes, Smoke Perp, Little Pump, Ski Mask. There's a bunch of them, and you could hardly tell them apart. It's like they're pumped right out of a factory.
I guess Lil Xan would be the white component of some of this stuff. Right?
Absolutely. And look at his name, Little Xan, named after Xanax, right?
That poor kid. Wow.
One of the most deadliest pharmaceutical drugs that exist. Someone in my comment section made a really good point. They said rap music, or we could even say pop music post 2010 has seemed to be just a large pharmaceutical commercial. And it's true.
Yeah, man, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, I loved it. I was like, wow, this is on point. This is exactly what we're experiencing here. And then you could get into the whole pharmaceutical tie-in, which is just a whole other road we don't got to go down right now. But so he passed away. He had a seizure. If you remember, Lil Wayne had been having seizures a couple years ago with his lean abuse. We've had Fredo Montana, of a Chicago rapper, died. I think it was last year due to complications from use of opiate syrup. We've had many of these guys pass. We had, why am I saying we had, like I'm in that culture, but there was the what is it, Little Peep? I think he passed recently, a couple years ago, due to similar things, overdosing drugs. So My whole argument was that it seems like this culture is promoting this type of lifestyle. It's not. We can't blame everything on the artists. Okay, of course we understand these artists are screwed up, and that was my first segment in the video. I explained how entertainers are damaged. I'd say they're damaged before they even get into the industry. That's why they go into the industry. And my argument was that I believe most mainstream artists that become famous or infamous were damaged prior to entering into the entertainment industry, and that is precisely why they are there, because they suffer from forms of narcissism that are just results of abuse. That's all narcissism truly is, if you look at it from any scientific perspective. And I look at it as a spiritual thing. I believe it's a type of possession. It's a dark spirit on someone that forces you to worship yourself or live out your life for your own needs and your own needs only. But they still are results of abuse. You know, if you look at child abuse, children who are neglected as a youth.
Look at Lizzo's confessional thing she did recently after she wore that thong at the game. You probably saw that, right?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was very much like, you know, don't judge me and all this other stuff, you know, just claiming that Jezebel spirit. And it's been in so many of them in the entertainment industry. Even back to that, the way I look at the way the system is now with music industry and movies specifically, maybe not so much TV because of streaming, and there's some decent creative shows out there at least, but it really is, if you will, like an Illuminati system where beast system has taken over those to the point where they just suck now, right? Because all they are is for agenda. That's all it is. Movies for agenda, TV, news, and all this. It's all agenda, and it's all just been crippled. And we can still find good stuff. I've always loved good music, but the best stuff I find is sometimes a random YouTube channel with, you know, a couple thousand subs, and it's a band out of some kid's garage or something. I mean, you can find some really classic, good, cool music out there still, but it's certainly not going to be mainstream or promoted, you know?
Yes.
Same with movies. I love movies, you know. I can still find some cool, underground, low budget. I like thrillers and crime movies and stuff, you know, so yeah, they're still out there. You know, there's a lot of great stuff, but it's just not being pushed in the mainstream. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, there's tons of stuff out there, man. There's a lot of decent entertainment that isn't completely postmodern and degenerate. It's just that you have to be a certain type of person that is willing to, or even interested enough to look around and kind of dig a little bit. Me personally, I tend to like older things. I love watching old stuff, you know, and like you said earlier, everything has had some degree of manipulation or propaganda in it, but I look at some old things, and they're just much more easier to watch, and you know, and I enjoy it. I guess I'm more nostalgic in that sense, but I just can't. I find no entertainment in anything current today. Really, it just
yeah.
You know, it's all corrupt, all of it.
There is some great stuff people could binge on that's, I think, is pretty decent entertainment, and it's real old stuff, folks. I mean, this is real old, but one of them is called Little House on the Prairie. If you've ever had a chance to see those are so good, and it's not goody two shoes. Good, bad characters, and there's drama, but great show. Another one I thought was Highway to Heaven was a nice one. You know, it's like it had a nice message and all that too. But those are a couple in the past I've binged on. But then on the other hand, I am a sci-fi horror geek, and I was raised in a very religious Christian household, but my father loved the goriest, scariest horror films you could ever imagine. So
mine too.
Even as a little, right? So as a little kid, I was raised on all the geeky, weird stuff, and that's why I went to film school, and that's why I pick apart the stuff I do now. You know, it's like, and in the process of researching things, I find some gems. I mean, there's some really cool movies people can find out there. There's even really good comedies. There's one called, I think it's called Greener Pastures. You guys in chat can go look it up if you like. The trailer for a movie called Greener Pastures. It's actually very clean, but it's beyond that. It's one of the weirdest movies I've seen in a long time. I loved David Lynch, you know, his work, not him so much, but his work. And I like the strange stuff. It comes out in my videos, you know. So this movie, Greener Pastures, if I ever made a comedy, it might be something like that. It's very strange and funny and bizarre, but it's not gross. It's not dirty. I don't think there was a bad word in it. You know, they got away with it, and it's still super strange and entertaining. Now I'm rambling about movies. Sorry, man.
But
Go
no,
ahead.
you're bringing up good points, and what you're touching on here is this idea of art, and what we've come to a point in time, especially postmodern art, it's really destroyed the whole concept of art and beauty and form and entertainment, right? Uh, I can definitely identify with what you're saying, because I grew up on watching horror films and watching all types of weird stuff. And I know some of it, I'd say probably a lot of it wasn't necessarily good for me, but it has given me more interest in things that aren't necessarily normal or common. And so I do tend to look into art and enjoy aspects of it. But what I will say is that when you are saved and born again, you do kind of lose those certain interests that kind of cross the line, if you will. So there is definitely a line that I draw now.
Same
Right?
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of horror stuff I won't even subject myself to. One thing I hate to see is anytime somebody's tied up or chained down and they're being hurt. Like it's
Oh yeah.
and that's in so many of these stupid movies. But
Yeah.
even with that, some night I'll have to do a show, and I didn't know you're interested in pop culture to this level, like all the geeky horror stuff. So maybe we can do a show and just talk about movies, because I know I can give a lot of good ideas to people out there. Some cool, creative, interesting movies I bet you've never heard of, and they're not gory and gross and everything else. They're good. They're thrillers, you know.
Oh, I'd love that. I've definitely always been into art, into, when you're a creative, a type that likes to create things, you tend to be interested in all types of things, and some of the times it doesn't necessarily make sense, and I think that's just part of being creative, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I just think when it's kind of put through a filter, like a godly filter, a Christian-based filter, in the sense that I think you can still be creative and you still can enjoy things that are artistic. Like, I love music. I love instruments. I love instrumentation. I love beats. I love different aspects of sound and putting words to music and putting image with words to music. That's why I do what I do. And it's like, I really get, I'd say, annoyed when people complain about, oh, why are you using hip hop music? I thought hip hop's bad. Well, it's the message that is bad. It's the spirit that is put on these beats that is bad. Beats aren't bad. I mean, we have all types of music throughout scripture, and singing and song and dance and joyous festivities. And I mean, it's just how it's how you are doing it. It's what spirit is behind it, right?
Man, I've said that so many times. I'm loving this because you're just speaking exactly how I feel. And I've had to say this because, like, with me, they'll complain sometimes that I'm watching scary movies or I'm doing this or that or the other. And then I have to explain if I feel like explaining. Usually I don't. Usually I just block them. But sometimes I'll talk to them and say, here's the deal is that, I see the God, if you will, in all of these things. I see God-given creativity to be a great actor or an actress, or to be a fantastic writer or director, or just a creative thinker. I mean, it takes a lot of work to make these things. So I see all the good stuff in it. But it's like you're saying, it's what people choose to do with it. Like I watch Ink Master, a TV show, and I like the art. But the issue is, a lot of the stuff that they do with it is satanic and dark. And there is definitely something going on with that show. Dave Navarro is one of the the judges, from Jane's Addiction and other stuff. But pretty sure he seems to be. And again, it's all speculation. But they have all the symbolism throughout the show. Beyond that, though, okay, I look beyond it and I look at, wow, when they're not drawing something gross and satanic, look at the beauty they can create. Look at the art, because I can't draw. I've always thought that was a really cool ability. But even back to that, and some people can't think on those levels. It's called discernment. I can discern these things. I know what to throw out. I know what to take in,
Yes, I totally agree. And, I came to this point where I was questioning myself because I would receive a lot of this. And then I realized maybe I'm not addressing the source of these messages. And when I did that, I realized, like, oh, a lot of these people are like, they're not even scriptural. They're like hyper fundamentalists. They're the type that think you can't do anything in this world. Like you gotta, you know, live on the street and be homeless to be godly. And I'm speaking in hyperbole here, but you know what I'm trying to say here. It seems to be most of the time the people that feel this way are being I'd say in their own flesh, even trying to control other Christians, you know, trying to shape other Christians' walk and not really considering their own. And in many cases, I wouldn't be surprised if they were complete hypocrites. But anyways, Jacques Ellul wrote a really, really good book, Ellul, called The Presence of the Kingdom. And he makes great arguments for the role of like the Christian academic or the Christian artist or the Christian historian or the Christian philosopher. And his arguments really resonated with me and assisted me. I don't believe he's a Protestant, but he definitely makes some great Christian arguments. And his whole point was we actually have to not necessarily be double-minded or join the system, but we have to claim a stake in the system, in a sense that we have to provide representation for our worldview. And this is exactly the method that I pretty much use in regards to the way I go about my information. And what I mean by this is, or should I say what he meant by this is, as Christians, there are times where there needs to be Christian philosophers. There needs to be Christian academics that can go into academia and argue the Christian worldview and prop up the Most High God's word and represent the importance of things like morality and Christ, and put them into and teach them in a way that is understanding. He makes this claim about language. We need to create a language where Christians can speak to the secular world in a way that gets them to understand. Because if you just throw a Bible at an atheist, they're going to laugh at you. Oh, it's a flying spaghetti monster, huh? You know, they're going to pull one of those on you. But if you, for instance, like even Francis Schaeffer is another inspiration for me in this regard. These Christian philosophers who actually studied the arts, they studied the classics, they know the way the world works. They've studied secular education, but what makes them so powerful is that they're grounded and they have this foundation in Christ. Therefore, they're able to see through all of the confusion and the manipulation of the world. And they're able to convey the message of Christ in a way that is understandable to those that wouldn't necessarily understand Christianese, if you will. So I think using art in the same way can have the same effect. And
do you ever? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that The Presence of the Kingdom by Jacques Ellul was really good in that regard.
Thanks, man. I'm loving all these books you're dropping as well. Do you ever feel, I don't know, forced by your audience or pushed to be more of a preacher or to speak more about scripture and things like this? Or
yes. And I think it's partially my fault, because when I first started my channel, I was full of zeal, and I probably was a little more aggressive than I should have been. But all of those that come to Christ, especially when you're newly saved, I wasn't necessarily newly saved, but it was new enough in my walk to where I was full of zeal, and I didn't know what direction I was going in. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to kind of learn more about the way these things work by talking about them or just sharing my knowledge. And I believe I kind of presented myself in a sense that, or presented myself in a way that maybe said I wanted to be a preacher, or that was my goal. I don't believe I've ever made those statements, but possibly it could have come across that way. But that's definitely something that I'm very humble in that sense. Like I don't want to take on that type of responsibility, because I don't believe I'm worthy. I don't, and I really don't. Like I would never want to take on that responsibility, because I'm afraid that I might make the wrong mistake. You know what Scripture says about those that teach the word. You know, you're going to have double the judgment.
I say this all the time, man.
And
all the time.
Studying Scripture, I'm in grad school now, studying theology and philosophy. So like I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to be better, but at the same time, it's like that's not my goal to be your pastor or to be your preacher. I don't even have that type of skill or ability, unless the Father gifts me with it one day. that's different. I don't believe he's done that for me yet. But one thing that I've always been is I'd say, I don't really like labels, but I've always been somewhat of a cultural sociologist, in a sense where I study the behavior of humankind, cultures, things that are popular, media, psychology, these types of things. I'd say I'm more knowledgeable in those areas. I'm a lot more well studied in those areas. And I believe those are the areas that need to be approached to bring the truth, to bring Christ. I think many people are falling victim to those areas of academia, especially sociology. You have the SJW progressive movement, right? You have all this progressivism that's bled into society by way of sociology, and then you have anthropology that's selling atheism, and then you have psychology that's selling atheism and all types of other spiritism. So it's like, I feel Christians can actually, I know this is not actually a verse in the Bible, but as everyone tosses around, we're in the world, but we're not of the world. I think there's some truth to that. And I think scripture does demonstrate that there is some truth to that. And as I believe, as long as you're not teaching a false doctrine, as long as you're grounding everything in Christ, as long as that's the only option you're providing, I think that you're pretty much doing okay. And also, I think, well, yeah, I guess basically that was all my point in that regard. So,
no, man, that's a great point. Yeah, I guess. I feel the exact same way, and I've said the same thing, and I've prayed about it, and I just don't feel led to be that person. Those aren't my gifts, and that's where we always have to get into the talk of there's many branches to this tree,
yes.
And we all have our own gifts. And my thing is, I learned a long time ago just to go with it, and to realize that this is what I do, this is how I was made, this is how I can serve, and I'm going to keep doing it. And it may be even in the future. I like that you're writing a book. I've been thinking about writing a book too. It'd be a mix of an autobiography, everything all the way through even YouTube and everything, all the craziness there, but about a door-to-door salesman to be mixed with some weird fiction stuff. But I was also a door-to-door salesman. I think it'd be really interesting, fun, but also you'll be able to drop a lot of truth and stuff. I don't know. But the point is, so like you, I'm thinking bigger and broader outside of this YouTube realm, outside of the digital realm, and start creating things, in the real world. I've even been praying maybe I could somehow get into it where I could make a film out here. I live in a place where it's pretty cheap out here, and I could find the talent, I'm sure, but who knows? So I've been working on those ideas too. But as long as it's about serving Him, and that's always my prayer too, is don't please, always keep me in check. Don't let me start getting myself too involved in this stuff and, wanting to be the little star of the show, and I have to always keep that in mind. I think it's important for all of us too. Some people may not need to always say it, but I do, that again, that goes back to not wanting all the attention,
Yes. Yes. And letting the message, letting the information be what's important. And as long as that message and information is grounded in Christ, I believe we can't go wrong in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So go ahead and continue on, man. If there's a different subject you wanted to go ahead and move on to or whatever, please. Absolutely. I'm loving this, by the way. And thank you, man, again.
Hey, me too, man. This is great. It's a long time coming, and we definitely have to do it again soon, man.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Let me ask, are you still doing okay? Because do you want to take maybe a few minute break or anything? Are you able to hang for a while?
Oh, I'm good, man. I actually do about a 2-hour show when I do my live straight through. Sometimes I'll take a little intermission between, but I'm fine. I'm actually pretty excited right now, so I got a lot of energy.
Okay, great, man. Well, then don't let me continue if there's something in specific, or, we could always get into, I know you've talked a lot about gateway drugs in the past and sex magic, kind of the connection with that as well.
Yeah, let's go into that. Let's go into that.
We can also get into something else I'd like to hear your view on, but it's all the obvious kind of race war stuff they're pushing, the race baiting, the Civil War stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Whichever one of those you want to start with, man. Go ahead.
Those are two big topics, but I definitely think we could touch on them both before the show. I mean, and I have no time restraint, mind you. So
okay, great, good. I'm good too. Then cool. Okay. So please.
First, I want to refer listeners to another book that I think is really good, especially with this idea of this postmodern world we're in today. Postmodern meaning Everything is being deconstructed, right? Relativism. There's no more morality. Everything is relative. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. You know, we can't upset anyone. We can't offend anyone because then you're imposing, you know, on their comfort, which brings this type of snowflake type of culture that we're experiencing, right? Everyone's very weak, and there's no longer integrity. There's no longer any dignity. You know, all the great different forms of virtue are pretty much falling away when you create a postmodern culture. And there's been a long systematic history behind this. And there's a pretty good book that demonstrates this. It's very basic. It's an easy read. It's a lot easier than something like Lash would write or Elul. Francis A. Schaeffer wrote a book called How We Should Then Live. And it's really, really good because what it does is it kind of gives you a historical view through kind of, he uses art, like in paintings, to kind of juxtapose his delivery. It's very, very well done. I really like the book, and it's super easy to read. But he really historically breaks this whole process down from, you know, from say the Reformation all the way into the Enlightenment era. And he really gives good arguments for how the worldview, or the consensus worldview of society, has been broken down and detached from God. And I think this is a good explanation for how we got to where we're at. And I think what's really important now, of course, the word is important. Of course, pastors and preachers and apologists are important right now. But what's also important right now, and I have many forms of evidence to argue this, is that it is also very important now that we have Christians and people of the faith in the academic areas, in the areas of knowledge, in the knowledge-based areas, because right now that is what is controlling society. There's been a detachment to the point where Christianity and the Christian worldview is pretty much ignored. It's obsolete. It's archaic. So it's like, it's to the point now where you couldn't even talk to the youth about these types of things. But when we have people that are in the areas that youth will listen to them, for instance, today, someone that's depressed is not going to want to talk to a pastor. They're going to want to talk to a psychologist, or they're going to want to talk to a counselor. We need Christians in those areas, not teaching some false doctrine or anything like that, but teaching that, or speaking to them in a language that they can understand, that they can take on. And then you deliver them the message of Christ. You deliver them scripture, and you also can use philosophy to explain these things as well. Craig, what's his name? Lane Craig, I think, has some decent philosophy books on that. I'm not necessarily fully behind everything he states, but he does give some pretty good arguments. Gregory Bahnsen is probably the bar none best apologist as far as argumentation goes for the truth of the Christian worldview. I've pretty much learned all my argumentation from Gregory Bahnsen as far as like transcendental argumentation goes. Gregory Bahnsen is a great source for that if you want it, you know, for addressing atheists and all of these young materialists that we're dealing with today. But
Great, thanks.
Yeah. But Schaeffer, in his book, he gives you the history, so you can have some type of foundation of how society broke apart spiritually. And it's just a really good source. And from there, I guess we can go into this idea of what was that first one you said before the race? You said
before the race,
like the occult, like magic and
sex magic
and all of these things. Yeah. So,
and gateway drugs as well.
Gateway drugs. Yeah, I see a big parallel there with this lean movement. You know, all these kids addicted to opiates, all these kids addicted to barbiturates, and there's a couple other forms of pharmaceuticals that they're addicted to. I know Xanax is really popular.
What are your thoughts on marijuana?
My thoughts on marijuana. You know, I used to be a lot more strict on my perspective because I do understand everything is spiritual, and drugs in general are spiritual. I do, because I have seen some medicinal properties of marijuana that can be advantageous to certain individuals, especially when it comes to pain and certain things, cancer and certain things. But as far as any recreational use, I think it's highly dangerous, and I think it's definitely a debilitating spirit. I believe regular use of marijuana puts a spirit on a person that will create um, like a lethargic type of operation in their life, where it holds you back. It puts you in a fog. It takes you away from reality. And moreover, people that regularly choose to use marijuana, especially recreationally, they're filling a void. There's no other reason to do it. So in that sense, there's no purpose for it, because that, for one, that's what Christ is for, to fill that void, because we all have it. You can run from it as much as you want. It's part of being a fallen nature human being. But
Yeah.
you're not going to fix that with marijuana. And most people that use it for that specific reason. And in that regard, I would say it's absolutely demonic, because I know what kind of spirit it puts on people. So that's my position on marijuana. There's this whole CBD thing that people are into now for pain, that has no THC and doesn't, I guess, get you
that's
high.
huge now.
Yeah, so there's all of this, we're getting into pharmakia, and it's speculative, one, and I don't really have any strong arguments, two.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I'm not gonna talk really deep into it unless I feel I could come up with a good argument for it.
No, it's okay. And we may have even different views on some of these things sometimes. I mean, the marijuana thing, that's something, and I'm being honest, I've told you guys in the past here on the show too, but that is one of those things that's still in my life and has been for a very long time. But I've always had a decent relationship with it, where it's always something I used at night. But throughout the years, the way I've always seen it myself, again, maybe I'm just self-hypnotizing myself with that, but I'm a feeler. I really am. And I really am a loner, and I am an INFP and all that. And
I see.
Right. So when I'm around even family events and stuff, I just feel everything. And that's why I don't like going out to loud places and stuff like this. So throughout the years, I always found that helped me to just kind of like go to sleep, calm down at the end of the day. And I don't drink. I don't have anything at the house. I never go out and buy liquor or beer or anything. So I always saw it as kind of my wine at the end of the day. But, a lot of people would say a glass of wine would be better. But the other thing, too, is that, I also understand the potential with that being a portal, and allowing the wrong thing in. But then I wonder, because it is from the earth, but then there's the other angle where some of the stuff you're getting, if you're not sure where you're getting it from, if it's not a local grower or something, it could be tainted, So this could be a whole other level of stuff and that's why a lot of the stuff's so much more powerful, I think, now, too. I mean, people can grow it to be pretty strong, but I feel a lot of the government stuff obviously is dangerous. But so it's complicated, That's why I've always had an issue with movies where every time they smoke a joint, he's a dum-dum, hey, dude, where's my car? It's like, because I worked out in Hollywood for many years, about 5 years or so, mainly in reality television. But even the guy that ran Hell's Kitchen, his name's Kent Weed. That's really his name. But his office, they'd be up there passing joints, him and the biggest executive producers on the show. And this was a regular occurrence. And I saw that in a lot of television shows. Of course, it's Hollywood. Saw it with a lot of producer people and all that stuff. It was a regular thing. I guess the point is they were still able to function, and get all their stuff done. But I just look at it as an individual deal. And I've taken it to the Lord a long time ago. He knows this. And I'm willing to give up things. I'm working. I've repented of a lot of things. Other things are still working on. And again, this is just my personal walk. I even feel weird talking this open about it, but it's best to be transparent, because some people can understand it and feel it, but so that's where I'm at, but yeah, I've got my medicinal cards, I'm a medicinal guy. And I mean, of course I know that's a bit of a ruse in a lot of ways. And I also get the element where, they can potentially, this could be used, to drug the population, I guess, eventually. And like, this wouldn't be it, but it could lead us into being okay with it in another 10 years or so, oh, it's fine, man, they did that. So yeah, we'll take this new thing they're putting out for us. I see it as a potential thing there maybe, and this is against speculation. I haven't read anything about that. So I see the evils, I see the possibilities, but I don't know, I still hold on to it. And, I'm just being honest, guys, but, again, I've always had a decent, I don't wake and bake, you know, I don't smoke it during the day usually or anything. It's just kind of a nighttime chill. I'm rambling on, I know. Please continue.
No, you're fine, man. And this, what you're bringing up here is, this is where I kind of just no longer have much to say about it, because I understand the position you're in. And for me, it was a lot different. You know, I had an issue for years with it. So for me, it was more like, this is a spirit. This is something that is keeping me away from living my life in a sense, right? Like the life that I feel that I'm supposed to be living.
Right.
So for me, it was a bit different.
Yep.
Your situation, I could have much more understanding there. You know, because then you're bringing up this idea of, because this is where stuff gets deep, right? We're talking about soteriology.
Yeah, we are, and I love it.
The relationship between God and his creation. You know, how does it all work? This is where we really only can speculate on certain things. But what about health, or should I say, what about ailment, right? We all have ailments to a degree. We have pain, we have injuries, we have disorders, we have, you know, sicknesses and disease. And in this life, we have medicine for those things. So for me, it's like, what are we supposed to be like, put everything into our faith and just be naturalists in that sense? Or are we to use some forms of medicine? This is where things get really murky. And this is where I fall back in that argument, because it's just, I don't have enough, I'd say, knowledge to really provide in a, you know, what's right and wrong. Because someone can say, oh, you should say someone utilizes marijuana for some type of medicinal purpose. And someone says, oh, that's satanic, you can't do that. But then they're just like popping pain pills. What's the difference?
Exactly. It's even worse. In fact, I don't know if you knew, I had a heart attack just over a year ago. Did you know that?
I did. Yes. I had talked about it on a live show.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
So that was pretty crazy. But the thing is that I even made a video called "The Beast System is Trying to Destroy Me," because they put me on 8 meds to start off with. And within about couple months or so, I'm waking up with suicidal ideations. And I had never had that in my life. I mean, I was really thinking about just offing it. I was like, you know, there's really no point in being here anymore. I've had a good run. I reasoned with myself. And after a couple mornings of this, I was like, something is wrong here. And I just wasn't feeling good. So I did research, as I should have done in the first place. And I found out about these statins and all this other stuff. And 4 of the things they had me on, all of them had the potential for depression and suicidal ideation. So I went back to the doctor, said, I'm not going to do it anymore. She put me on Zoloft. So I've never done an antidepressant in my life. And this is how they do. They stack you with meds. So I knew this, but I went ahead and said, you know what? I want to try it. I actually want to see what this stuff feels like. So when I talk about it, I can, you know. So I ran the 2 weeks with it, and I quit it immediately after I started feeling the effect. It takes like a couple weeks for you to feel it. And I'd wake up at 8 a.m. and at 11 a.m. I'm laying back down again. I was just a zombie. So I quit that stuff quick. That's when I started going full on, more all natural. That's when I got into kratom to help me get over any weird feelings from, you know, the morning, or from being on that stuff and all the other whatever. Plus, after a heart attack, your just system's kind of off. It's hard to explain to people, but you find yourself more emotional sometimes about things. It's very strange. You know, I don't know, but again, it's all new for me too. And I'm a younger person. I'm in my 40s, you know, and I'm not some crippled old man or anything. They said it was genetic. You know, I was adopted and I don't know my history. So, you know, it kind of came from out of nowhere. But again, it taught me a lot. So that's when I learned about kratom. That's when I went vegetarian and I exercise every day. I've completely changed my life. I've changed my health. And I even ground, you know, I don't know if you know what grounding is, but you can actually buy these straps that you can strap to yourself. And if your plug is actually grounded, it gives a tester with it. You can plug it in and sleep with this thing on and be grounded. And grounding, if you guys don't know about that, or earthing, it's something I'm really into now. I just got into it not long ago, but I'm loving it, man. I feel a big difference, especially sleep. Yeah, wow. I'm sleeping like a baby. But, you know, the whole point of it is, it's like they say that you know, what happened before pharmacists? What happened over 100 years ago? For all that time, what were people doing? And that's
Exactly.
where, you know, yeah, you get the medicine men, even some of the pagans and the witches knew about some of the earth stuff, but more importantly, the tribes and the Indians, you know, people like this.
Well, then I would also argue we're different structurally now. So, I mean, just everyone might not necessarily follow epigenetics, but I mean, over time, especially experiencing technology, hormonal changes, change in diet, all of these things over time, we've structurally changed. So I believe personally that we suffer from a lot more ailments today than individuals did back then. I believe human beings were a lot more stable, a lot more calm. They had a lot less, or at least they were less susceptible to become sick and these types of things. So I think
Right.
we're experiencing a different time. Our bodies are different. I believe we're weaker. I believe we're less apt. And a question is this: okay, say someone has severe sleeping issues, right? And there's really nothing that they can naturally do that actually works. People, you have to sleep. I mean, you have to sleep for proper cognitive function. So what does one do? Okay, say there's this type of medication, a type of pharmaceutical medication, and let's even say it's not necessarily chemically based in any dangerous sense or addictive sense. Let's just say it's some natural substance that helps you sleep. How is that any different from, say, utilizing marijuana for that purpose, right? What is it about marijuana specifically that makes it different from that other drug, right? So that's the part where I come to a little confusion, to where, you know, where do we get all of this from? You know, where does the theory behind it, where does the empirical evidence behind it come from, if there is any? It's so yeah, when it comes to ailments, especially you think of something like marijuana that does come from the ground, it is natural, right? It's not necessarily meant to be smoked per se, but I mean, if you're taking it in some type of other form, I'm not really sure how people choose to do that for sleep issues. But my biggest concern is when drugs of any kind are being used to fill some type of spiritual or psychological void, or used in a way that is abusive.
Yeah,
Or
I'm with you on that.
that's where I really draw the line.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. And yeah, like I said, I guess, you know, on my end, I've always felt okay with it, you know, and I've always, again, we're all led in our own way to do stuff. I used to talk about this stuff a lot more on my catching up shows a long time ago, but you know, I started seeing the numbers. I think maybe you knew that, but I started seeing 111 back in 2012. Yeah. And I made a video on it back then, but I still get them, you know, and I've always seen it the same way. It's almost like God just saying hi, you know, just reminding, hey, I'm here, you know, and then I spend some time with them, you know, every time it's like, thank you, you know, and I remember, you know, and that's important. Sometimes I feel like I should be putting scriptures up on my wall because they help, you know. It's just I don't look at them enough. But then when I do go look, it's like, oh, okay, there's an answer. That's makes sense now. You know what I mean? So
I do.
But also I think being raised the way I was and seeing a lot of things in religion that I don't like, and just there were people I knew throughout my life, but in different religions, but all Christian, that would tell you the Bible back and forth. But these were some of the worst human beings that I've ever dealt with in my life. And so that's why I've never been impressed with people who know the Bible. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That's not a big deal to me.
Yeah, the devil knows the scriptures. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, you know, but you know, it's also feels strange because it feels like it is written on your heart naturally. I feel like I understand things, and later I'll find a scripture and be like, oh, I've always thought that and said it. I just didn't realize it was a thing here, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, I think God works with us. He works on us, right? I could give an example. Like, for instance, I'm totally against the abuse of pharmaceutical drugs. I believe they are gateways, especially when used in a certain manner. Me, myself, I experienced a pretty serious sports sports injury years ago. And I was given pain meds for this injury. And it was a pretty serious injury. And I think it was about 6 months. I was taking this pain medication 4 times a day. And, I had no idea of what the results of this was going to be. I was just trying to keep myself from, dying of pain every second. You know what I mean? And by the time, surgery was done and I was healed and everything, I, I, I had these crazy cravings for this drug, and I ended up being addicted to it for almost 3 years after my injury. And it was just, and this was before I was saved, so I didn't really have any real like options to get out of it, outside of just either quitting cold turkey or whatever other method was available. So that was really tough for me, man. And I believe God was working on me that whole time, and he was leading me down a certain path to Christ, and it took me a little while after that to fully get to Christ. But and even after I was saved, I had a few run-ins with it. So it's like I feel we all have issues in life. We all have things that pull us back into the world. And I believe as long as you have a grasp on these things, through faith and through prayer, I think you can be delivered. But just because you become a Christian or you call yourself a Christian doesn't mean you're not going to have any struggles. It doesn't mean you're not going to have any pain. And that doesn't mean it's okay to go sin. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is we all experience this to a degree.
That's been something he's been working on me with for quite a while, because the phrase I kept seeing in my head when I'd pray about stuff like this is deny yourself, and
yes.
that was one of the missing components, because, and it kind of showed me also something else I've been asking is, please show me the real distinct difference between us, followers of Christ, and then the religious ones, the ones that talk about you all the time and got pictures of Jesus on this and that. Not everybody's bad. I'm saying a lot of the Pharisees are like this, they're out in the streets and they're praying on the TVs, and
yes,
what's the difference here? And then, then finally, that really put things in perspective,
Yes, absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah. It's a deep thing, but you know what? I not only do I identify, but I empathize with those that are going through this type of struggle. And I would not be one to judge them, especially if I know that they know they're wrong. They're fighting. They're in prayer. I would have a lot more empathy in that situation, opposed to those that are just completely giving themselves up to it and even want to claim that there's no moral reason not to abuse drugs or to practice certain behaviors and all that. So I think you can't put it all in the same boat. And I don't believe this is being double-minded at all.
Right.
Because some might say, oh, well, what is it? It's one or the other? It doesn't always work that way. And I know that from experience. And I know people in my life right now that are struggling with addiction. I know someone that is struggling with different forms of amphetamine addictions, and
that's a tough one.
And they're good people, and
yeah,
it's they hate what they're doing, but God's working on them, and
good.
I believe they will be delivered from that. And I know it's wrong. They know it's wrong, but I'm not going to judge them for that, because I know that even DMX is a great example. If you watch some of his experience through jail and through his addictions, the whole time he was praising Christ, the whole time, even when he was at his lowest low, he was high, just praying high. Right?
Yeah.
He was delivered. I believe he's clean now.
He exposed a lot of stuff. Okay, we can go back then, because again, I'm putting the movie together. I'm putting some stuff in. I just found some clips in, and this kind of fits into what we're talking about, but I found some old clips of ODB. Remember ODB?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So there's a great one you can find at ODB saying the government's after me, man. And he goes, I'm talking George Bush and those guys, and he's saying they're getting phone calls and stuff like this. But around that time, I mean, was that really that uncommon? I wonder, or was he crazy? I don't know. But there was a lot of talk like that, back then, about exposing stuff and the government coming after rappers. Like DMX is another example. they really railroaded him, you know, in so many ways. And that's what he was kind of trying to tell us. And he did kind of expose so-called Illuminati shenanigans or Freemason connections or something the best he could. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember seeing some of those jailhouse interviews too. And he was basically saying, hey, I get it now. I've learned my lesson. They're not going to stop, you know, and stuff like that. But go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, being in California and born and raised in California, I've been around industry types. No one really like super famous, but I've been around people that have tried to get into the industry or got a foot in the industry. And I've learned quite a bit from these different individuals. And it always goes back to this idea of as soon as you even get close to some type of stardom or fame, or even just around circles or within circles of people that are famous, there is this constant sense or constant availability of drugs and sex. So when artists get into the industry, women are either thrown at them or throw themselves. It could go either way, but usually women and drugs are provided for them. I've had a friend that was told, what do you want? We can get you this, we can get you that. And it's like, I believe they put these artists in a situation where they try stuff and it's fun and they try it again. And before you know it, they're hooked in. And this, I'd say this was more of an 80s, 90s thing. But now it's completely different. Back to the Juice WRLD situation. Now these drugs are so cultural. They're so promoted in the part of that element of cool, as you had mentioned. Now it's cool to be a druggie. It's cool to be popping pills. It's cool to be sipping cough syrup all day.
Well, they got young kids now. They're getting like, 12 years old, around that age, 13, 14. They got a lot of these kids now sucking on those jewels on vapes and stuff because the flavors taste good. And they're also getting their mom and dad's vape pens and smoking weed. I've had a few stories of kids getting sick from doing that.
There you go.
But this is just the beginning of what we'll see as more of a normal situation eventually. And again, see, that's where, it pains me to say it, but I can see where the system will use anything to control the masses. And I could see more the weed being just the beginning. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't bring something else in soon, some kind of combo thing. It's going to take care of your depression. It's going to give you energy. It's going to, I'm just saying, guys, you may think it's crazy, but I don't, I can see them doing stuff like this potentially. Yes, we're speculating. I'm not making any predictions, but so I can see the evils of it as well, unfortunately. So it's, again, I try to take it all on an individual basis, but anyway.
And this idea of portals, drugs and portals and sex magic, I think is important, because what happens when one is inebriated or quote unquote high, it does something to the body. It does something to the libido, right? Which causes people to pretty much be willing to behave in ways that is non-characteristic of who they are. They're more open, right? They're more willing to engage in ways that are possibly dangerous or risky. So this is this idea of gateway. And usually this leads to sex. In many cases, we see alcohol being probably one of the biggest ways this happens. But today, I'd say what's even more popular is ecstasy, or today they call it Molly. I think Molly is a really, really big gateway drug, because what it does is it pretty much turns, and it affects people differently, of course, but for the most part, it seems to have this sexual component to where it makes people hypersexual. And they end up having very risky sex. And this is a giant gateway into things like soul ties. And everyone doesn't necessarily believe in soul ties. They're theoretical, but at the same time, I do believe there is something there. There is something there, because when you exchange fluids with another person, especially if you don't really know them, or if there's no real emotional attachment there, you will never be able to deny what happens after that fact. Once you lay with someone in that way, it's different from that point forward, unless your conscience is so seared that you have no semblance of morality or self-respect at all, which occurs, to where you just lay down with all types of people and you don't feel anything anymore. I'd say that's the lowest you can get, right? That's not too far from death in many cases. But you still have individuals that do open up and lay with people after taking these drugs, and they end up having all of these feelings for the other person, and then they get their heart broken, or and you know, they're never able to get over this person, or they go get another person and make that feeling go away, and then that breaks off, and they get another person and make that feeling go away, and before you know it, they've been sleeping around for years, and they're just a basket case, and they're depressed,
Yep.
and they're anxious, and they have no self-esteem. They don't know who they are. They only look at themselves as a piece of flesh that can be utilized for someone else's pleasure, therefore giving them value. This type of situation is just, it's inherent when it comes to any type of drug community or drug-based community. This is the result, and this is what you see with all the entertainers, all the celebrities. A perfect example is Ariana Grande, who jumps guy to guy. I mean, she's just soulless. She's absolutely soulless, and she's pretty open about her depression and her anxiety because she's gotten there through the abuse of drugs and sex.
Did you know a good example of her, the magic that these people use? And she's all about Kabbalah. She has it in almost all of her videos. But
oh yeah,
do you remember there was that trend for a while of people grabbing food and licking it and eating it and putting it back?
Yes, I do. That was so strange.
Right. And she was the first one to do that. There's a video. Yeah, y'all can look this up. But there's a video of her from maybe a year ago, maybe even a little bit longer, where she's with her boyfriend in a stand-up deli or something, and she grabs one of the donuts or something off the counter, takes a bite and puts it back, and is giggling about it. And that happened way back. And so when I started seeing this thing with people licking ice cream and all this other stuff, and I'm like, wow. I mean, you know, if the way I see stuff, I just say, wow, that was planted a long time ago. You know what I mean? And now it's suddenly this explosive, and that's social engineering. That's why I talk a lot about predictive programming and stuff. It's very interesting how this stuff enters into the realm, and then all of a sudden it's everybody's doing it. You know, it's with all that dumb stuff like eating Tide Pods or acting like a freaking plank, you know, and stuff like this. Anyway,
yeah, and doesn't it speak to this whole idea of attention, of virality, you know, getting viral, you know, getting mass attention. This is a lot of times I talk about narcissism in some of my latest videos, because it's important. I believe there's this type of spirit of narcissism that has been covering society for a long time, and a lot of it, and there's a lot of aspects to it. You know, there's social aspects, there's familial aspects as far as like child rearing and parent-child relationship. There's a lot of things that causes these things at the end of the day. But what I've noticed is that we are behaving in a way that mirrors this idea of kind of toxic narcissism, where everyone's just concerned with being seen, right? We just want to be seen doing something cool that other people like, and that's how we get our value. And I think that speaks to this idea of licking, you know, food and putting it back. Like, it's so foolish. It's so stupid. It's so absurd. It's like, why would anyone do that and copy each other, and it becomes a trend? Well, the only reason that is because they want to be seen doing it. And they want to achieve that recognition of mass appeal by way of something so absurd and foolish. It makes no sense when you think about it. It's like, if you want mass appeal, if you want all this recognition, wouldn't a healthy, stable, normal person want to do something worthy of it? That's not the case. It's now, you know, instant gratification, dopamine obsessions and addiction. So there's no regard for that. It's just like, it's all about getting people to see me, and as many as possible. And what I do to get that attention doesn't matter anymore.
That's so true, man. Here's a good example of something too I'd like to hear your view on. It's a subculture, of course, but there's a TV series I've been watching. And again, this goes back to kind of my watching habits. I do think, you know, God's got people everywhere. Sometimes I'll find something where I really start wondering, wow, the messages in this, even the underlying themes, I wonder if this might be one of his people, because I was trying to be something like that when I was going to go into the industry, you know, write messages with a hidden message, but a good one. You know what I mean? Just flip-flop it a little bit. But sometimes I feel I find artists that are, wow, okay, this is so good, you know? So I've been watching this show. It's called Evil on CBS, okay? And it exposes a lot of stuff. It's very interesting, though, too. It's stuff that I've been exposing, you've been exposing many years. They even have a talk at one point about demons, and this priest and this other priest are talking, and he says these things work in symbols, they work in numbers, you know, and all this other stuff and patterns. And I was like, yep, wow, right? But that's just one example. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really interesting. But they have this subplot where the devil, it's either the devil or a demon, is in human form as a lawyer, and they have to deal with him sometimes too. And oh, sorry, he's a psychiatrist. And this subplot they've had for the last few episodes is they had this kid. He was an incel, basically, right? They had this kid that was coming to the office and visiting him, and for therapy. And the kid was, looked like he was a geeky looking white kid with the glasses, and just the exact example stereotype you'd think of some of these incel type kids. And that's what he is. And throughout it, throughout the episodes, you'll see his visits to this guy, and which is essentially a devil or a demon. And he's telling the kid, he's like, you should get angry about this, because the kid was talking about being turned down by a girl. He's basically grooms him into going in and trying to commit a mass shooting. And one of the first target was going to be a gym where there's just a bunch of pretty girls, But the thing is, again, this is right there now, right out there in the open. And the incel thing is a very real thing. I'm curious your thoughts, because I've done some videos on a lot of these mass bang bangs. I have to watch out saying that word too much. And the connection with a lot of these so-called incels, Elliot Rodger, and some of these kind of guys. And do you want to go into some of that and tell people what an incel is and kind of what you know about that culture?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting you bring this up. This is I'd say at least a whole chapter on inceldom in my book, and it's it's fascinating. I don't mean that in a positive way. It's very intriguing how this has come about. But it's sad at the same time. It's a very, I'd say, dark representation of the human experience today, in the youth especially. And I will say this: it's not that incels have never existed. It's just now that a platform has been created that has given them a voice, and they have created a community around those platforms. Incel, basically, it stands for an incel is an involuntary celibate, which means they involuntarily are celibate, meaning they for whatever reason can't seem to have relations with the opposite sex. They're usually either too unattractive, or they are extremely asocial and neurotic, in a sense that they can't really properly communicate with women in a way that would make them attractive, especially attractive enough to have intercourse with. So,
I'm sorry, I just want to add, I feel like that's a big part of the issue. I watched a really good documentary on that culture a while back, and most of the kids in there, they weren't, disgusting, evil creatures. I mean, if they would have cleaned themselves up, combed their hair a little bit, it was all about the attitude, zero swagger, if you will. But, they had no confidence at all in themselves. And it makes me wonder about people's upbringing, too, when I see stuff like that, where you're always told you were a loser and a piece of crap, because there's that stuff, too. But anyway, I just interjecting, but go ahead, please.
No, this is great, because you're really saying some important things here, and you're bringing something up that's vital, and that is upbringing. And there's a lot of other issues that are involved that I'm going to mention here. First off, it pains me that this epidemic or dilemma is not being addressed honestly. It's not being handled in a responsible manner. It's being, in a sense, it's almost being demonized, in a sense where they're creating this monster archetype of the incel white male, which it couldn't be any further from what these people or what these individuals are really suffering from. And I use the word suffering because they are actually,
they're wounded.
They are wounded, and there's many different facets within this idea of wound too. It's not one thing. It's not that they're just unattractive. What you'll find is, most of the time, especially online, you'll find information that is just referring to this idea of attractiveness, this idea of the standard good-looking male represented in the Chad archetype. And then you'll have this standard attractive female that has high sexual value and sexual freedom and agency, that's called the Stacy. And they live in this paradigm where they have this it's almost this strange sexual dichotomy between the um, the far and away inaccessible attractive woman and this dominating opponent in the good looking Chad, and they sit in the middle as these like poor souls, these just poor little puppies that just can't, they just didn't get a good shot at life. This is kind of what you'll learn and what you'll see online, but that's kind of the surface of it all in my studies, because I really, especially for the book, I did some deep research for this. I really actually joined some communities, not necessarily as myself, but I kind of did my own, you know, undercover work in these areas, and I picked up a lot of information. And
Yeah.
me being which I study psychology at UC Berkeley, so I'm very educated in all forms of abnormal personality typing and disorders. And what I've discovered is that a great majority of these individuals are suffering from different forms of what psychology and science would call disorders. I believe they are spiritual disorders, and they usually are a result of abuse, neglect, and different forms of familial demonic activity. But also included in this is what I've discovered is that autism is a very large part of this incel archetype. Many of these incels tend to they tend to suffer from different degrees of autism.
Wow.
And autism is really just, it is a spectrum. Okay, it's controversial. There's a lot of BS out there. There's a lot of bad science behind it, but overall, autism is a spectrum. It goes from being high functioning to extremely debilitated, almost non-functioning. Some would call that mentally challenged or mentally retarded. That's not used anymore. But basically, it has most to do with an inability to properly communicate socially. Very socially awkward, and in the worst cases of autism, they don't really know how to read certain cues, emotional cues. They lack what some would call affect, which means they have no real emotionality in their behavior. They have a very almost what some would call poker face, where they don't necessarily you can't read emotion on their face. They're very flat. That's a term often used. And to many, to I don't like the term normal, but to the average person, this is very off-putting. You know, sometimes it's scary. Some people are scared by these types, but it's just low affect. It's just and they tend to be hyper introverts to the point where they're almost schizoid. And I believe the majority of incels suffer from a type of schizoid disorder, which tends to be someone who wants to just stay in a room and kind of fester or obsess with video games and things that are either technological or systematized. They like systems, especially high autism. They're very, very good at systems and the mechanization and systematization of things, to where they're brilliant in many ways. There was a film called I believe it was the Accountant with Ben Affleck, and he was an autistic man, and he was like some genius with numbers. I believe Rain Man is a good example of this type. And so they have strengths, but at the same time, when it comes to the social realm, they're at a loss, and they're at the end of the line in that sense. And unfortunately, many of these males tend to suffer from a degree of autism in many cases, or full-on schizoid types of disorders, or they experienced abuse in their home. Many times they have all of these things that are comorbid, meaning they're all happening at the same time. They were abused, they're autistic, and they're also schizoid and all of these other things. But they're also addicted to video games and pornography. I have a big section on this where I go into the dangers of video games and pornography, and how they actually form a couple. When you do research into inceldom, you'll discover that these individuals all pretty much practice heavy video game playing and pornography addiction. And this is something that it's like a package deal. And if you do even a littlest a bit of research on pornography use, it does rewire the neural pathways in the brain. And it is very detrimental, not only to the function of the brain, but to the entire spiritual capacity of the person. To me, pornography also known as, I believe, porne is the Greek it comes from. It's this idea of like sexual possession. So what it does to you is it completely tears you down spiritually and gives you up to your flesh, to the point where you're no longer capable of being a godly person. You're just stuck in that flesh. You know, you're stuck in these lower realms of gratification. There's even a term now that's going around called the coomer, COOMER, which is to represent these types of young men and sometimes women that are just so addicted to pornography. All they really do is play video games and masturbate all day. It's an actual real thing. It's
wow. That's like Idiocracy.
It is. Absolutely. I mean, that's probably one of the most accurate films I've seen, you know, depicting this era, this postmodern nonsense of absurdity that we're experiencing today. But so this is these are some ideas around what inceldom really is, and they vary. Okay, like you said, there's some guys they don't look like anything's wrong with them. They're actually pretty decent looking. I'd say most of these guys that we're seeing on television or in the mainstream that are calling themselves incels are not incels. They're just, you know, grifting pretty much, right? Trying to ride the wave of this whole hoopla and create some fame out of it. Now there are actual legitimate incels that are interviewed. I've watched many. I recently watched one. It was a British show. I can't remember the name of it, but you know, you really feel bad for these guys. And this specific incel, he had a speech impediment. He had skin issues. He was partially deformed a little bit. You know, you can see that he has a struggle in the world just in general on his appearance, but he also had social issues. Like he was, you know, very insecure, very fearful, doesn't really know how to communicate properly, and with that low affect to where they kind of seem weird and stuff to the average person. So, you know, you feel for these guys. But so that's just an idea of kind of what they struggle with and how they operate, how they appear, some of the issues that they have, a mixture of autism, a mixture of abuse in the family. Many times these children are heavily neglected throughout childhood to the point where they're stuck in rooms and put in front of a television or a computer usually, and they just play video games, and it becomes a cycle. It becomes a lifestyle.
But it's interesting that they everything you're describing means they're perfectly programmable. And maybe that's that connection between some of these kids going out and doing some of this stuff.
Don't ruin my book, KJ, please.
Love it. All right.
No, I'm just messing with you. No, but you're right. Yes, this is kind of where we're going with this.
Wow.
They're preparing, and it's not just incels. It's not just these specific types of males. This is happening all over the place with perfectly average quote unquote guys and girls. Okay. You don't have to be some partially autistic, asocial, unattractive person to get addicted to video games and masturbation. This is something that is very, very common today, and it's actually promoted through many of these mainstream YouTubers that you see today.
Oh, yeah. The
KSI guy has been promoting masturbating to pornography since he's had a channel.
Oh, I didn't know that. I actually I don't watch him. I watch Drama Alert, so I've seen stuff from there. And you know, I've mentioned that in the past. Maybe you're the same way. I do subscribe to a lot of big mainstream things just to see what the masses are looking at and thinking. You know, and
yeah, me too. Yeah.
You know, and that's where you get a TMZ, man. You can get some of the best information from there. I saw TMZ put this out, and it was a clip of Lady Gaga after a concert, and it was fairly recent. This is maybe a year ago. And again, we're speculating on things, but it appeared to be some kind of a momentary, you know, breakdown there. You know, just the circuitry just kind of got crossed for about a minute. She just went into some kind of weird place. But, you know, that was a TMZ is where I first saw that. You know what I mean? So TMZ, these places, you can find some of the most interesting stuff sometimes.
Oh, yeah. This because those are the programming platforms. Those are the places where they sell you all the BS they want you to consume so they can alter your worldview, the way you see things, the way you feel about yourself. And that usually means believe in nothing and feel insecure. That's the message. Believe in nothing, feel insecure, so we can provide what you should believe in, and we can make you feel better with our products and with our messages and so forth. But yeah, my issue is this, though, with these incels. One thing you'll find with all of these types is that they always, or you always will find that they do not have any belief system. They're usually atheistic or agnostic. They believe in nothing really. They have no desire for God, no desire for truth, no desire for anything across Christian lines. At least I've yet to come across a Christian incel. That's almost an oxymoron. It doesn't really compute.
Yeah, they're just constant pleasure seekers, really.
Yes. And see, now you're getting to it. So what this is it's just an example of hyper technology, hyper big tech production. This is an imminent result. There's no escaping this result when the world is becoming a giant computer, and human beings are mere tools and objects of that giant computer. The greatest example of how all of this came out is through Lewis Mumford's book, Technics and Civilization, which Neil Postman pulled quite a bit from in his Technopoly book. But Mumford demonstrates the cycle of all of this, and he really makes strong points about how society, especially after the tool using cultures of say pre-industrialization, once that changed, it went from technology as a means to survival and subsistence and or just modern getting by in life, making the best of the world around you. It went from there to this idea of industrialization, where progress and power was the goal of technology. Technology is all about progress and power over the earth, kind of subduing the earth in a biblical sense, but not at all biblical, if you know what I mean. And taking power in a more Luciferian sense, a more man over God sense, and utilizing technology for the progress of technology, and for progress for the sake of progress. And that's what we're seeing today with Musk, Elon Musk, and Kurzweil, and all of these types of guys, these transhumanists. They're the result of this change, because I'd say what we can see is that, especially once the internet came out and we were able to do all these high technological things, the production and quote unquote progress of technology had become exponential to the point where there's no limit. And this is the argument Mumford was making. It's the argument Postman was making, that the reason we're in the predicament we're in, or the predicament we will be in, because those books are pretty old, they were saying there's been no limit put on the production and the direction of technology. Technology has become a means with no end. And when you have that situation, humans become food. Humans become simple cogs in the gears of the ongoing and developing and restructuring technology. And this is when we will see actual non-human technology, hence artificial intelligence. These books were written far before artificial intelligence, but these books were predicting artificial intelligence. They just didn't know how to word it or how to label it. They're not omniscient. They didn't know what was going to come. But this is what we're seeing with AI. AI is that form of exponential technological progress turned into God, to the point where AI will now be controlling human existence. We will be tools for the AI. In fact, I say AI isn't artificial intelligence. Actually, it is intelligence. But humans are the artificial intelligence, because we no longer think for ourselves, live for ourselves, understand truth and reality, which can only be understood through a worldview that has God in that, and mainly the Christian worldview. So we become the artificial intelligence. That's basically how I see it.
Dang, that's a lot to digest. I love it. It's great, man. Another thing that we kind of bounced off earlier, and I just want to see, jump back a little bit and see what you think about it. But it goes back to, again, how I always look at it like the TV show Survivor. They really do try to constantly separate all of us, all of us human beings, into separate little camps. And this is where we get a lot of the stuff now with pronouns and the LGB with this, and then a lot of the racist stuff coming up. And, you know, I'd mentioned not long ago that I think it was on my show last night that every week, you know, I do this news show, and I'm always looking through all these different news sources every week. It's what I do, and I'm making my videos the whole time and doing other, you know, creating other things. And I noticed these trends, and I've noticed a lot of racial violence over the last year. And I don't show it on the channel for that reason, because no matter what context you show that, and I show some every now and then, you know, I'll show there's certain trends, like been a trend with crazy old white ladies calling the police every time they see a black man entering a complex or something, even though that's his home. There's been a lot of things like this. And then on the other hand, there's been a lot of violence of black people beating up on white people and saying, you know, I don't like you because you're white or whatever and stuff. But again, I don't want to play a part of that programming where I'm showing this stuff every week, because that triggers some people. It doesn't trigger me. I see both sides of it, but do you see what I mean? But the point of the matter is that it's a trend I'm seeing, and it's on the rise. So it's some programming out there is working on the people. And I'm definitely seeing a lot more hatred in the races. Again, not just white and black, even brown, build the wall, this, that, and the other. Take that to the extremes, of course. You know, there's children in cages, and they never did that, but Obama did. You know, it was very interesting. You know, how they do that flip-flop all the time too in politics now. Isn't it interesting? Like the whole thing with Biden's son, they got the video of Biden actually admitting, you know, using his position, you know, to kind of influence the Ukraine. And now they're trying to make everyone think Trump did that. It's very interesting.
It's so interesting. But yes.
It's the inversion, you know, it really is mirror world.
Yes, the inversion. What's the revealing of the method? What is the term?
Right. It's the externalization of the hierarchy, I think, is maybe one of them. And then there's, the revelation of the method, I think, is the other.
Revelation of the method, yes.
Right. That's like Foster Bailey stuff and Alice Bailey stuff.
Yes, yes. We're seeing a mixture of all of these things, because, of course, we know Bailey and this whole theosophical society that goes back to Blavatsky and Besant. We understand that when we look at the theosophical society that came late 19th century, we understand that got a lot of its ideals from Eastern mysticism, of course, but mainly the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and a lot of this. Also, I would say there's Neoplatonism mixed in with that. It's a mixture of things, but we have that going on to bring in this neo-pagan universalist monism type of stuff. But also we have this this racial thing that you're bringing up here. That's really interesting. And we've been seeing this for a while. I remember when I first started my channel, I did a lot of talks on this racism stuff, because, you know, I've dealt with this for a long time, especially being a leftist. You know, I made a lot of arguments for some of these things in college. So I understand what these arguments are and where they come from, but it's all propaganda. It's all rhetoric at the end of the day. When you really start to research, you know, all areas, you can kind of get a full circle understanding. And what I'm seeing here is what you're saying, this hot and cold kind of thing. It's like a push and a pull. And what it really reminds me of is when you research SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and these types of occult abusive practices, this idea of putting people in different temperatures as a form of trauma, like put them in ice and then put them in hot water, and it shocks the body, and it creates major trauma, and it could kill people. It could kill people, right? It reminds me of this idea of putting you in freezing cold water, then putting you in boiling water. And that trauma that you're experiencing is what we are experiencing in this modern media realm, by showing, you know, something on one end and then showing you the opposite of that, and forcing you into this position of cognitive dissonance where you have to accept them both at the same time. It's like, it's kind of weird and deep, but it's happening. We're all seeing it. Many people don't know how to put the two and two together, especially when they've done no research in this area. But we see virtue signaling, right, through the SJW movements. We see the pushing of humanitarianism through the progressive movement, the new left, you know, the AOC and that whole socialist democratic thing, Bernie and all them pushing all this humanitarian work. But at the same time, And with that, they're pushing like toxic empathy, this way of you know, having empathy for everything, in the sense that it becomes toxic, where you're not really facing the issue, you're just giving empathy. So someone could be a drug addict, right? They could be addicted to heroin and they're shooting up every day, and instead of giving them the proper guidance, bringing them to Christ, trying to get them out of that through the proper means, let's just give them a place where they can go get free needles. Let's just provide an option for them to discard of their needles, so it's nice and clean and they can just do their drugs freely and safely. Right.
That's why there's disease spreading in these really liberal cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. You know, of course, they're pooping all over the place and everything else. And yeah, because they're being so accommodating to people's sin, essentially.
Which actually ends up resulting in the opposite effect. It's counterproductive, which shows you there's no logic from the beginning. It's a false premise from the start. So you're only going to get falsehood in the end, which results in damage and pain and suffering and crap all over the street, right? Or people laying all over the ground. You know, I remember I had a place in San Francisco on Mission, and every day I walk out of my apartment, I have drunk guys laying in front of my doorstep. I have to step over guys to get out of my house, right? So this is just part of that progressive neoliberal type of society that is the world today. There's no longer real conservatism today. I'm personally a traditionalist type of conservative. There is no real conservatism today. The Republican Party is not conservatism. And I'm not necessarily talking about conservative in a political sense, even though I do agree with conservative policies to a degree. I'm not into all of the war stuff at all.
Right.
But I'm in a virtual or a virtuous sense. I'm conservative. So we don't have any representation.
I know what you mean. It's almost as if maybe you're the same way. Regardless of what the political party is, you know, we pray on the issue and we kind of are guided, you know. So in other words, we're looking for what God would want as far as what we understand. You know, that's kind of,
yes.
Am I right there?
There you go. There you go. I align my political views, my cultural views. I align those with God's perspective and scripture, at least to my best ability. And so basically this hot and cold kind of traumatic experience society is going through right now. On the one end, we have the virtue signaling, you know, helping everybody out, making everybody feel great, even though if they're killing themselves, let's still support them because, hey, it's their truth and we don't want to impose our will on their truth. We have that with the pushing humanitarianism. We want to save the world. We want to make everyone safe. We want everyone to have health care and all of this. But at the same time, this is the cold part. So we got the hot there, and then we'll go to the cold. At the same time, they're atomizing society by making us all individual robotic-like machines that are plugged into this massive interconnected digital system of social media and the likes. With that, they're also so that makes us detached, right? So it's like at one end, they're trying to bring us all together through humanitarianism, environmentalism, and socialism, right? Not in the political, not in the economic sense of socialism, but in this idea of socialism where, hey, love your neighbor, pluralism, basically. This idea of we're all, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, we're all together in this together, right? But at the same time, they're detaching all of us and atomizing us into individualistic machines through this type of technological system we have. The way we communicate, the way we operate today, especially with the youth, is mainly in an atomized technological way. And at the same time, we have, you know, this like tribalism, spreading people apart through race and spreading people apart through political beliefs. So at one end, they're trying to bring us all together, and at the other end, they're tearing us apart. How does that make any logical sense? It doesn't make any at all. And when you look at it from that perspective, then you can see the manipulation, then you can see the trap, then you can see the inconsistency, and you can realize, like, wait a minute, if you guys really want to save the world, why are you locked, you know, elbow to elbow with the big tech companies that's literally destroying the minds of children? You know, it just makes it makes no sense. So yeah, whose side are you guys on? And why is it that we're not doing anything to actually help humanity, but all we're doing is putting all our money in the production and the progress of technology. You see how the technology is going crazy. They're putting all kinds of money into it, all kinds of effort.
Oh yeah, yeah. Virtual reality is going to be huge very soon. I just did a video on it. It's right on the verge. They're putting all these companies are putting lots of money, especially into these new forms of glasses. They want everyone to be wearing these glasses that are basically going to be your new Apple Watch. Excuse me. But you're going to have all kinds of crazy stuff you can do within your glasses and see screens and, you know, actually be on your computer. And so the companies are trying to find ways to model this in a way that's cool, that's acceptable, that more people will want, you know, whatever. It's a whole thing, and they're putting millions upon millions of dollars in this stuff. So
yeah,
they just want us completely plugged in. That's really what it is, you know.
And then what if I say, okay, this is your plan, but what if I tell you the result of that is going to be the atomization of humans, where we all become independent atoms that are detached from our like cultural and even spiritual religious bonds, right? We're detached from our human connection. We're just single atoms. A good example of this is in the show Black Mirror. I believe it was the second episode of the first season, where they show people they're like riding electric bikes to, like, they're playing a video game. I just remember there's some bikes involved. They play video games to make money, basically. And then they go home and their room is, all the walls are screens. And this is the only way they interact, really, is.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Did you see that episode? The guy
Yeah.
from Get Out is in it, starring in that. So that's like an atomized human, to where you're not really existing in the real world. You're not really interacting in the real world. You're actually just a single like atom that is interfacing through screens and technology with other people, but you're actually completely detached from real human connection. And that is a great example of atomization, or an atomized society, to where we're all just singled out and we're only focused in our own worlds, such that we were watching, you know, whether that be, and in that episode, they're constantly inundated with pornographic commercials,
right.
and they have to pay money to stop the commercial. So that means they have to work harder to pay the money to stop. It's just, it's madness. But what you see is that that may be a hyperbolic example of what's going to happen, but this is the direction we're going in. And I argue we're already there. And you can see it in the, say, 10 to 16-year-olds. They're completely atomized. They don't know how to really function socially in a healthy manner. And there's no reference for what's healthy, because everyone is completely changed and altered by way of the technology. We have no reference. The only references left are us from the older generations. We're the only reference, but now we're silenced. We're called boomers.
Do you ever feel,
we're shunned?
Because I don't know your family situation or anything, and you don't have to tell us anything in specific, but do you ever feel that there's no point in even trying to raise a family in this thing, or do you think that it's more important that we try to raise a family?
Well, as a Bible believing, Bible obeying Christian, I believe that the Most High God ordered us to replenish the earth and be fruitful. So I believe that we should actually, and this is through faith. Now, what you're saying, is it worth it? Because look at everything. You're right. But through faith, we do this knowing that God's going to guide us. He's going to guide our children. He's going to protect our children. And we understand that we have to, our people, our church, if you will, the body of Christ, we're going to be here during the last days. We're going to be here during all of this. So we can't try to escape that by not reproducing. I think that goes against scripture. Personally.
Yeah, man, that's a good point too, because
fearful.
Yeah, that's great point, for real. I love it. And I love both the points. And even with the whole rapture thing, that like myself, you've been in this kind of community for many years, and we've seen all types come around, and I see the division in the church just by the different denominations. I can tell, and the different dogma people have, and they'll come at you, with their rules. If you don't abide by the rules, you don't believe in God, or you're not with Jesus and stuff. So, we see this kind of stuff, but and there's just too much of that anyway. There's just way too much.
Any real Christianity out there, honestly. I mean, the majority, especially anything statewide, most of the churches, I'm not telling people not to go to church or anything.
Right.
just saying there isn't any real representation in any organized sense in society today. It just doesn't exist. I think now true Christianity has been thrown not only to the wolves, but relegated to the shadows, if you will, right? To where we are low in number, and we are despised, we're shunned, and we're ostracized from experience in the real world, in the modern, or I'd say postmodern world. The Christian worldview is offensive today, and it's on its way to become illegal, I'd say.
Yeah, but again, sorry, I meant to keep going on with a point earlier too, but it's with this rapture stuff, you know. So uh, I've seen all sides of it. I see people making solid points that seem solid to me. Then I see people making great points for us going through it. And this is why I've never made a solid stance, because frankly, I don't worry about it. You know, I'm not worried either way. I've put my prayers in. It's like, hey, Lord, if there happens to be some kind of a catching away, you know, hands up, you know, hey, can I please go? But if not, you know, I know you're going to be with me in those days. I believe that the people, the remnant, you know, the people that have to be here for everything, that, you know, the Holy Spirit's really going to be on fire with these people. I mean, especially I think about medications, about diabetics and heart patients and stuff like this in those days. And are they going to suffer without their meds? And I don't think so. I think that'll even be a time we see people laying hands on each other and really healing. And this is my thought and feeling about it. Again, you know, sometimes my head's in the clouds, but what do you think about that?
I agree 100%. That's how I see it. I think during these times, the Spirit is going to work heavily in the world, and I believe certain people will be rose up to fight in a spiritual sense. And that's why I think it's important for us to reproduce and have children, because we are the only ones that are going to be able to provide the warriors. We're the only ones that are going to provide the soldiers that are going to be the ones out there fighting, because I think we got some time. I think, you know, I know there's going to be a lot of changes very soon, huge cultural and political and governmental changes. I think our entire economy is going to be changing soon.
Yeah, you got a good point. That's why we need more numbers. You know, that's great. I mean,
yes,
I've made most of my life without it. I'm still not totally opposed to children or anything, but I was always a traveling man, I guess. Yeah, I was always a gypsy, and I've lived in so many places and done so many different things. Not have relationships throughout the years, but then it's time to go, you know. It was always like that. But you know, I've been praying a lot about that myself and stuff, because I've had a lot of friends in the past that would say that, oh, there's no point, man. It's, you know, the end's coming, blah, blah, blah. And then they get married and have kids. And then they're like, oh, man, it's the best thing that ever happened in my life. So, you know, you think about these things. So I stay open to all these possibilities. And, you know, I just thought I'd ask, because I know there's a lot of people that do get too caught up in the doom of this stuff, you know. And again, oh my gosh, Jesus is coming back any second now, you know. And that, again, the reason I'm passionate about bringing that up throughout the years and talking about it is because many years ago, before I was awake to the stuff we are now, I was still saved. Yeah, at 11 years old, I was saved and all that. But there was times I would live in this fear, you know, of like, what's the point of anything, you know, because Jesus is coming back soon, and you know, this world's kind of going nuts. So, you know, let's just have experiences, you know, and let's just not think about it. But either way, we have a different path. You know, this one's worked out for me up to now. But again, I'm staying open to it. You know, I don't want to completely close out the idea, but I just know I know that resonates with a lot of people out there. It also goes back to the whole loss of love. Like, maybe I was ahead of the curve, but, you know, now we're seeing it actually become, unfortunately, a worldwide thing where we see all these fractions pulling off. You have the growth of the men going their own way movement as well. We have third wave feminism on the other side. And, you know, we have all these little fractures, and it's just, but, you know, my parents have been together 40 years, you know, and they're still together and still madly in love. So I have a good base. You know what I mean? I've always believed it's possible. But anyway, go ahead. Don't let me ramble on about Valentine's Day all night over here.
No, you're good, man. You're making all really good points here. I would say that, for one, we're not all meant to raise families. We're not, or even have children. right? And that goes for men and women. So God brings us all up in his own, by way of his own will, in his own specific way. And I just think that's how it is. So I think you're correct in the sense that you should be open, you should be willing, but at the same time, giving up your, I'd say, worry by allowing his will to work through you. And that's how I live my life. So I think you're safe going about it that route. Not to say I know what's safe, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, there's also the other side of the argument. Like you said, I've always been comfortable living this way, and even in the Bible, I believe it was Paul said, it'd probably be best to stay, single and solely focused on the walk, right, and on the Lord and doing what you're supposed to do. But if you can't control your loins, right, I guess that was it. Am I wrong?
Yes,
then
no,
you should
you're right.
get married. And okay,
Exactly.
so I think about that as well. And there are a lot of people that do better alone, and there's some people. Nikolai Tesla is a good example too. I'm not saying I'm Nikolai Tesla over here, but Tesla is a really fascinating subject. I read a book on him a long time ago too, but he, died alone and was always single. But he did, he was married to his work and he's completely dedicated to what he did in this world.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you look historically at, I'd say most thinkers, philosophers, men of God, that were in the truth, I'd say most of them didn't have children and weren't married, and because that's what their mission was, to bring the truth.
I like that. And that also goes back to the whole thing, even with pornography, because that was a battle I had for a very, very long time. But I'm proud to say I've been able to.
I think all men have, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm doing good now. There's always maybe a moment there and there throughout years and stuff. But, it's like I finally figured it out. And it really is the whole just resist and the devil will flee. It really is when you get triggered by things, especially the stuff we look into. Sometimes I'll see something. It's like, oh, you get triggered. You know what I mean? So
True.
You want to go look at something, but then you just got to remember it's a dead end. That's what I always think. It's just a dead end.
Yes.
It's not going to, it's just a feeling thing. And you're going to be so much better off just saving that sexual energy. You can use it creatively, with your projects. It's kind of the way I've always seen that, and that's a way to kind of get everything out and not have to be a horn dog about stuff, not have to be a slave to, touching yourself all the time. It's terrible. It really is,
Absolutely. Isn't it a shame that we are so weak that we're given to these types of behaviors, right?
Oh,
isn't it terrible?
I hate it.
Yeah, because
it really is. I hate it.
Men, 100 years ago, they didn't have these issues. Now, I'm not going to say men never, pleasured themselves in an autoerotic fashion, but it was never, for one, cultural. It was never promoted.
Right, okay. Right. It was shameful, and also back then they would say, "Get a woman," go get you somebody. Yeah.
Yes, it was shameful, exactly, and there wasn't this opulence of adult pornographic imagery to test or to lure you in. Right now, I mean, you can't even look at an ad without seeing some sexualized image that does form a type of trigger, especially if men have been, doing this for years, since a child, and that's why I feel bad for the kids today that are watching pornography at, say, 10 years old. I was exposed to pornography very early. I've been very open about this, discussing it on my show. I was exposed very, very young, and it definitely had some serious damaging effects on me over my young adulthood and into my adulthood. But I will say that, that was a time where you only could see something like that if it was on a VHS tape.
Yeah, I remember those times.
And you had a VCR and no one was around to catch you watching. Okay. We had limitations. We had barriers and parameters that you couldn't get across. And then in a sense that saved us from being so mentally damaged by this stuff. But today, I mean, and let's go into the early 2000s where there was the internet. So now it was available. But even and I only am familiar with this because I'm like any other guy that experienced this stuff. So I don't have any problem or embarrassment discussing it because this is just part of our generation. This is a part of trauma that we all have been exposed to, right? And we're all familiar with it. I'd say 99% of guys are, right? So in the 2000s, we had the internet. But even at that time, though it was more readily available, it wasn't necessarily free and it wasn't all over the place. Now it's a bit different. Not only is it on the internet, but it's free in hundreds and hundreds of ways, and we have it in our pockets. We can carry it with us wherever we go. Before, I mean, even the 2000s, you know, you had it at your desktop or something, right? Now,
Oh yeah,
it's in your pocket. And now little kids have these devices. So you can see the just like incremental exposure increase over time. And so now it's become so dangerous because it's too easily accessible and it's extremely addictive. So when you put those two things together, it's a recipe for disaster. And it's now become a global epidemic.
And if you didn't know, there's a show that you'd probably do a really good breakdown on. Not even probably, I know you would. But it's called Utopia, and it is all about the lost generation. It's all just trapped in drugs and sex, and that's all they care about. And have you heard about this?
Very familiar. I actually did a few light breakdowns on my Nightline show. Due to work, I've had to postpone that show, but I will be doing it again soon. It was a 4 nights a week show, 2-hour show. And it's on my backup channel, Dayz of Noah Discuss, for those that are interested. It's just all of my it's all my Nightline shows. It's basically just a podcast pretty much where I talk about stuff similar to yours, how you do your news. It's kind of similar. It's like the same type of platform.
Cool.
But yeah, I talked a little bit about Euphoria. It's the epitome of what we're talking about right now. And you know what's so bad? What's so bad about it is it's so cavalier about it. It's actually proud in its display, right? They're not showing you these things like it's a warning, or if it's like, you know, this is what this is. It's not like it has some moral message behind it. In fact, it's almost like promoting it. Now, of course, they do kind of show you that, because I believe and I haven't really watched much of it, so I can't really say exactly how the characters develop, but I could just see how it is marketed, and I get enough from that. And even if there is some type of moral message, like the girl ends up, you know, suffering from depression and all of these things, it's still showing you that, hey, everyone's doing these things, right? Everyone's doing these things. This is just perfectly normal. And you see the characters, there's all the transgenderism, there's all the homosexuality, what is it called? Polyandry and polyamorous relationships, heavy drug use, heavy sexual activity, and everyone's like, they're all young. So yeah, it's just, that's probably some of the worst stuff out right now. That show is definitely one of them. Netflix has several shows like that though, that are across.
That's too bad.
It's really bad. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Yeah. And it's so normalized.
It really is, man.
You would be made fun of talking the way we're talking right now in just the general population today. People would think you're some weirdo or something.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Netflix blocked me from their YouTube channel a long time ago just for making a comment, you know.
Wow. Really?
I know. Yeah, yeah, man. I was really surprised by that because it started getting a lot of hits, you know. I can't remember, I called them on something on one of their shows. And yeah, and then later, like the next day, I was just curious. I went back to look, and it was at the same thing. So I logged out. That's how you can tell. Then went back, and I was like, it's gone. It's like, oh, you jerks.
Wow.
So I know. Thanks a lot, Netflix. But, you know, every now and then there'll be something I like on there. I like Lost in Space, and season 2 is coming up pretty soon. I like science fiction stuff sometimes. But yeah, I feel you. I've done some videos on all the whack programming on there, Rattlesnake was an example, a movie they just had on there about doing a deal with the devil.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always the same thing.
Yeah,
you know, really, there's so much of that programming on there. There's something it's in a new video, and the video will be out in a few days, but it's a little bit of unicorn programming in a show called Living with Yourself with Paul Rudd. Just random unicorn programming, and I associate that with, that's a symbol of this beast system, I believe, manifesting, you know, because it's right. It's, you know, the weird is being put up to being normal. It's like that Illuminati card that even says that. But
yes,
weird is being normalized. And now, you know, the quote normies are the weirdos.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's so interesting, man. Yeah. Especially this unicorn thing. You know, the unicorn is the mascot for transgenderism.
Yeah, and it's also on the coat of arms for the British Kingdom, right?
Is it?
Yeah, you should look that up. But it's the British coat of arms. I don't want to say British. I think it has something to do with the Queen, the whatever you call that, the monarchy or something. But
Yeah.
their coat of arms has two animals, and one of them is a unicorn.
Wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, you guys can look it up, please.
Yeah, definitely. I have to look that one up. That's not surprising, but I wasn't aware of that. That's very interesting.
It's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. It's like this show is about a guy that clones himself. He wants to be a better version of himself, but the clone winds up living, so he has to live with his clone, lives with himself. But there's moments in there when they go to this, it's a clinic in a strip mall, and they go in, and then the front looks crappy, but the back is this high-tech, cool, sci-fi thing. And when he goes in there, he notices a little, just as he's going under for the operation, he notices a little unicorn stuffed animal in the room. And then later he goes back to the office. One of the doctors is wearing a unicorn on his head, a horn on his head, and playing with his daughter who's dressed like a unicorn. And he also told them, I'm giving away parts of my video, but whatever. But the doctors also said, don't look down in the toilet when you go to the bathroom the first time. After the clone thing, he looked down and it was a rainbow in the toilet. And that's the only time they ever mentioned anything unicorn. There was no explanation at the end. And I was like, wow, that's a great example to me of real unicorn programming, and the bigger picture is what it really stands for, so this love is love type stuff, right?
Yeah. And also this idea of a mystical animal that doesn't even exist.
Right.
And then there's the phallic symbolism too, which you can't deny.
Oh gosh, that's a great point as well.
Yeah.
And that's probably why it's been so adopted by, of course, LGB and all that kind of stuff as well. And right.
Deep stuff.
Man, I was going to say, I just realized we've been going about 3 hours, and I hope you've been going smooth. It's been great, on my end, and on your end, it seems like it's been going good. But I think I'm going to go ahead and probably start ending the show here in a little bit, and
it's been 3 hours.
And I hope that, it's been a good run. I need to get some dinner going. I got to get the cat fed, and start getting ready for bed and stuff. But before we do, man, please tell the people, where they can find you and some of your work and stuff like this. And if you don't mind, I'll end with a prayer after that. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I've always thought about what this would be like, especially after that first time we had discussed it years ago. So it's great. It's great to finally make it happen. And it came out to be even greater than I had imagined. So thanks for having me, man. And if anyone's interested in my work, of course, you could check out my main channel, Dayz of Noah. That's with a Z. Days with an S wasn't available. So yeah, Dayz of Noah channel. I also have a backup, Dayz of Noah 2.0, which is pretty much my podcast show. And also I have a website that I recently launched. It's been several months now. It's going pretty well. It's just very simple, dayzofnoah.com, DAYZ of Noah.com. And please join that network. We got forums, live chats. We have all kind of stuff on there, merch and all that fun stuff. So just wanted to create a platform that would be available for our community. Say we get kicked off of YouTube, which seems to be the case, at least fairly soon. So yeah, join the site, dayzofnoah.com. I also have a BitChute channel, Dayz of Noah with hyphens in between the or surrounding the of. And so I'm on BitChute. I'm also on DLive. I just joined. I believe I have 1 subscriber. So if you like to join my DLive channel, check me out on DLive. We'll be doing regular streams there, simultaneously with YouTube streams. We're just going to keep rocking until we're booted off. But if we are eventually booted off, there is the website and the other platforms. But those are the main areas that you can find me on the internet. I also have some videos on some other platforms, like what is it, Motion. I think
Daily Motion.
Yeah, I think I have a profile there, but I haven't even checked that in probably a year or so.
Yeah.
Also, I'm working on a book now. It should be finished pretty soon, and I'm going to be pushing it out right away. So hopefully early 2020, I'll be releasing my book. I don't want to give away the name just yet, but it will be discussing quite a bit of the things we've covered today. So be looking out for that.
Awesome, man. And yeah, this has been a real pleasure, man. I've really enjoyed it. You know, I just in the last, I guess, this past year, I just started doing more live streams again. So, you know, that'd be cool if we can unplug them. We'll talk more later, but, you know, we'll figure something else out, because I feel like I already know we could keep on going with much more. So we'll have to do this again sometime. It's been awesome. And I'll just say a quick shout out to the people, guys, every one of y'all. Thank you so much, you know, as always, for being here. I appreciate you. And thanks for just taking the time. And I hope you walk away with something good from this, and it helps you somehow and enlightens you, and you can use this information to share with others. And thank you. Thanks for the moderators. You all did fantastic. I really appreciate you. As always, my Patreon, PayPal supporters out there, thanks so much. When I have sponsors up, I appreciate you guys checking that stuff out as well. Still working on the movie. It'll be up on January 1st, and another video coming out in a few days. Thanks so much, guys, for being here again. I'm going to leave real quick with a prayer, and I'll just say, Heavenly Father, first off, just thanks so much for our friend Dayz of Noah here, for the fact he could be on here. This has been awesome. Great information, and I just pray it gets into the right ears and it helps people out there. I know it can help people. So thank you again for him and for just who he is, and for having him here tonight. Thanks. Thanks for the wonderful audience. Thanks for the fact we still have a platform after the December 10th deadline. Lord, I know I joke around. It's in your hands, and I know if anything ever happens here, you'll lead me in a new direction that'll eventually be even better. I have no doubt. So thanks again, though, Lord, for everything. Thanks again, folks out there. And I love you, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Guys, thank you.
Amen.
All right, guys. Hey, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. A new video, like I said, in a few days. And my next live show will be about empaths and personality types. Okay? So we'll talk to you then. Take it easy.